There we go. Bing, 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 bing. Okay, good deal. Okay, so we have a new person. So Christopher, we'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, I go by Chris.
Okay.
I'm taking a little bit different path. I did watch most of the first day, so I kind of saw all of your intros. It looks like we have everybody from I'm turning 23 and I can be a dispatcher to folks that are more my age. So I was a Marine pilot for over 20 years, and then I worked as a flight instructor in Kuwait on the C-130J. I've also instructed in King Air 350, so I do have a lot of pilot background. So I know you probably think this will all be easy for me. Trust me, it won't be. I don't know what the flaps are like on a 727, for example. I'm, of course, studying for the ADX like the rest of you, and it's not a breeze. So don't think that it's painful. It is painful. Anyway, I live in Las Vegas right now, so I'll be driving into St. George, about 2-hour drive away. My wife is here. I do have a daughter. She's up in Seattle. Yeah, right now I actually work as a dispatcher for the Kuwait Air Force still. But I guess I'm not a real dispatcher. We do most of what a dispatcher does, but it's a lot different. For example, we're not in contact with them. We don't track them as they fly. Like I track them on a third-party app, but we know when they landed when they text us on WhatsApp. So it's a little bit wonky, but I did want to get my certification, and I plan to go back out to Kuwait to be a resident there as a dispatcher. So that's me. That's kind of where I'm at.
Great. Definitely a unique background. We've had a lot of different uniques throughout the years, but yeah, that's kind of cool. So sounds like you're doing fun things. So
yeah,
very good. So did anybody have any questions, burning things that came up since last night? Brian.
I have just a couple of completely random questions. First, when we're at the in-person, are we gonna? Is there any software we're gonna have to install on our computers? Or okay, I just wanted to make sure because I have my laptop's like over 10 years old, and I was hoping we weren't installing some kind of like.
We're not gonna install anything, so.
Okay.
It's good. SkyVector can get, it's just web-based. Everything we do is web-based. So web-based or on paper, we're in the Google Drive.
Cool. And the other one was for the quizzes and the Legal to Go quizzes that we do. Are we going to do those in class on Monday, or do we do those on our own time prior to class on Monday?
No, so the weekly quiz will be dropped into the class on Monday. So you'll get here, it'll be dropped in. You guys will have so much time to finish it, and then class will resume, but you'll do it there, as we go. Some of the activities will be done like partially together, some as homework, things like that. So kind of a mix, but like I said, I think I said this last night, it doesn't really serve you well to like work ahead. Just in the event that you're working ahead incorrectly, you'll be establishing, incorrect habits. So, once you've kind of gone over something or suggested some things to try and practice on your own, that's when you kind of want to chase down that street.
Okay, cool. And does that apply to the Legal to Go quizzes as well? Because I noticed
like right now, if you tried to jump in and do them, you wouldn't really be able to do anything.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure when
it doesn't serve. The whole point is not to just guess and see what happens. It's to practice your knowledge. So
yeah. Okay.
But yeah, you don't want to be jumping ahead, and the instructors will let you know this is what you need to do, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of start something tonight. That you'll hear throughout the course. What's been happening? Has anybody seen anything happening in the last few days in aviation news? What's happening out there in the world? Anybody caught anything that caught their eye? Noah.
I mean, I saw that Allegiant and Sun Country are merging. I don't know if we talked about that yesterday, or if that was
what? We actually didn't, because I saw that news today, and I was like, that actually surprised me. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, me and my coworkers had a long conversation about it, because a lot of student pilots that were from our school work at Allegiant, and they all went on strike because they weren't getting paid enough. So like, it's funny how they can go and buy Sun Country for 1.5 billion, but they can't help their pilots out. So
It's all a thing. Always a thing. So who knows? Maybe they're buying their pilots and maybe they behave better. I don't know.
we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, no, that one surprised me. And it's interesting. You never kind of know in the business world of things what happens, behind the scenes. So kind of a whole different gig. So yeah, anybody else see anything? That was the only thing that really jumped out to me today. What was the weather where some of you guys live?
Cloudy with a chance of missiles. No, I don't live in Kuwait right now, but I do worry about where I'm routing my guys with what's going on right now.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah.
Let's get away from the weather of missiles landing on our head. What kind of weather's flying around in where you live?
In Las
Where do you
Vegas,
live?
it's
What kind of weather? And is it a good
Fair
day
enough.
to land an aircraft? Brian.
I was just gonna say because I like to nerd out. I follow a X account that posts like all of the air traffic issues at different airports, and I was seeing a lot of ground stops due to snow at O'Hare today. So that's one thing I noticed.
Ooh, O'Hare, Detroit took a beating today. That whole area up there, really, it was a mess. So does anybody else live up near there? Yeah, really long taxi outs, long de-ice lines. I think some of the delays were 2 hours, just like waiting to get out, things like that. So yeah, some crazy stuff there. So what about some of the rest of you? What kind of the weather? If you look out your weather window right now, what are you seeing? Brett.
Yeah, so I'm in Phoenix right now, and it's like 76 and sunny, light wind.
Phoenix is so beautiful this time of year. Literally perfect. Yeah.
It really is very nice.
Yeah. Alexander.
Salt Lake is 1 mile per hour winds and cold.
Yeah, cold, but skies, what do they look like?
Clear. Everything's
Clear.
nice. It's a
Sunny?
weird
Yeah.
weather here in Salt Lake.
Yeah, it's nice. Just there's been a little cold going through the country, which is probably driving the mess that's in Chicago, right? So Noah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm in Utah Valley too, and this morning it was really bad inversion, so visibility wasn't the best. But then I had an interesting conversation with our chiefs and all the other pilots, like, because our SOPs it was like borderline visibility because it was 5 this morning when I was dispatching aircrafts, and so it was like on the verge of I can't send you out.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're talking with the chiefs, and they're like, well, our SOPs are flight visibility, so once you get up top, take off the ground, then it's unlimited. So then we had a fun conversation about how do we find out what the visibility is once you get off of the surface level, because that's all that METAR reports. So
it's kind of interesting. I actually had a conversation one day with a pilot he had a nice perspective. He said it's the only job in the world where I get to see the sun every day because you fly out of that mess and you're up on top of it. So
yeah,
that stuff sits a little lower. So yeah, and you guys are out of the Provo airport?
yeah.
Yeah, which little planes probably do pretty well. It's a challenging airport actually. So for performance, especially when the runways get wet. So for bigger planes. So very good. Yeah, I think you'll find that you start looking out your window. Can I fly in this? Is this a good idea? We love those 10 and clear days where there's no wind. It's a good day in the neighborhood. But yeah, the up like Detroit, all the way through that whole area, moving into New York, which I suspect New York will be the problem tomorrow, but because as it moves along. But yeah, it was kind of disgusting up there to say the least. So very gross. Perfect. So we're going to kind of move on to the next one. So Let me share my screen. My struggle bus. I'll make sure I'm in the right one here. Kind of weird how it shares now. So very good. Moving on to there. So, okay. So again, these are all of our laws that need to be followed. Federal aviation regulations, FARs, FARs. You'll hear all of those different iterations depending on the person. There's no right or wrong, just tomato type thing. So we did talk a little bit about this book. You are able to buy it on Amazon. I'm going to be honest, I've never purchased it. It's just because it does change, you know, it's kind of an antiquated thing. What you can go to is this ECFR. Make sure that's still showing. It doesn't show for me, does it? I'm going to show you. We're going to do this whole unshare and share again so that you can see the next thing. Biggest drawback of doing this. Here we go. Okay, so this is that code of regulations. It's going to have all of the different information in there that you can even think of. You know, like I say, there is literally everything under the sun that you can get into. This is where all of this information is housed. So you can click through all of the different things and, you know, kind of see what pops up. Like you can learn about the banking laws. You can learn about whatever. The president, he has his whole thing, you know, all of these aeronautics and space. That's, you know, where we're going to get into things like that. So Federal Aviation Administration, you can click through here and you can find all of that stuff. The book kind of lays it out, you know, cover to cover, where this you can search in and you can do stuff like that. So you'll have all your definitions, you'll have all of these different subchapters, you know, things like this. And this gets into those parts we talk about. Okay, so, you know, there's something specifically for the aircraft. So all the rules that make an aircraft airworthy. Why are we able to fly it? All of those types of things. Airmen, so this is going to have all the different the medical certificates needed. Pilots, flight instructors, things like that. Certificate, Part 65, remember that's us. So this is what we talked about a little bit last night. Okay, so this is aircraft dispatchers. This is our group is Part 65 here. So this is where we're gonna talk about all of those different things. So, you know, we talked a little bit about it last night, the training facilities, the personnel, the records, everything that we have to do. A lot of this is on the school to become a Part 65 school, but you know, this is also, it's going to come in with you about everything that needs to be taught in this situation. So, you know, we've got mechanics, we've got all of these different people that are in this category. So we can let's collapse this back. But that's kind of how you're going to organize stuff through. Oh, that's subpart C again. So moving on through there's all kinds of things. If you ever want to pick through there, like I say, feel free to buy the book. If you're a book person, I do encourage you to kind of focus on the dispatch specific stuff. I know we've had a couple of students that feel very connected that they have to read every FAR. I'm just going to tell you, most of them you will probably not remember unless you just happen to be, you know, the Rain Man, which there's a possibility, but also like having that practicality is going to help you as well. So, but those are some things there. So let me come back to my little slide. This is a dumb process. It's probably, it has to be operator error because it only does it for me, I swear. I think we have more PC users than me though, but. Back and forth. Oh, I made the wrong one. Okay. Yeah. Lindsay being awkward there. So that's another place like that. There's all kinds of, you can find things like advisories, circulars, all these extra things on the FAA.gov website. So another thing, so ECFR.gov and FAA.gov, both options. Like I say, everything's kind of evolving. I don't know that they change, like you have a book from a few years ago. There might be some slight tweaks. You just don't know where they are becomes the thing. But it's just an option for you. You can always find them. Like I say, I think I shared with you that they have those little tabs and things like that. So you have a couple of different things here. Then what's kind of the difference? This source of regulatory information, the FARs or FARs, that's the Federal Aviation Regulations. And then the AIM means Aeronautical Information Manual. And this is, you know, basic flight information that's put out by the FAA or set by the FAA. I got a hand up, sorry. I got to switch screens to the other screen here. Is that Brett?
Yeah, I just wanted to add really briefly that the FARs, the ASA sells an app for $10 that updates every year, and it's pretty easy to search. I think it's a little bit easier than that website, personally.
Oh yeah, the website's not super easy. So who does I've never done an app with the FARs. What is the app?
It's published by ASA. It's just
ASA.
called FAR AIM,
Okay.
and it's $10, and they update it every year, so you don't have to buy it again.
Oh heck yeah, and it's a one-time purchase.
Yeah, one-time purchase. It's
Hey,
really
look
good.
at
I've had it for a couple of years.
Okay, nice. Very good. Is it pretty easy to search?
Yeah, it's very easy to search. I like it a lot.
Okay, that's cool. So there you go. A new resource. I love it when we get new resources. I'm never used them on an app, so that's cool. I'm sure I'm late to a late adopter when it comes to technology. So, okay. So again, here's some of the highlighted FARs in general, the important parts that we need. So definitions, abbreviations, part 1, the airworthiness. So I've used that word a couple of times for the people that are new. What do I mean with airworthiness? And sorry, looking at Lakeisha.
We can't see the PowerPoint, Miss Lindsay.
Oh, are you kidding me? Thank you for letting me know. Okay. Did that work? Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so but back to my question. If I say the word airworthiness, especially for the new to aviation folks in here, what do you think that means? Brett.
It means that the airplane is in compliance with its type certificate and is in a safe operating condition.
Yeah, the plane could actually fly. Like, that's a good thing, right? We don't want janky aircrafts out there flying around all broken. Now, they might have things broken on them that we can still fly with, but they have to meet specific standards that are going to be set forth here. Part 61 for certification. This is, again, we just kind of did this, went through a few of these: pilots, flight instructors, ground instructors, things like that. 65 is going to be airmen other than crew members. So that's us. So that's where we spent a little bit of time last night. Part 71 is big on the airspace, which we kind of did a little highlight reel on that last night. Part 91, you'll hear this a lot, especially in a job, general operating and flight rules. So flights can be operated under different types of rules. Like, so I can operate under Part 91 rules. I can operate under Part 121 rules. I can operate under Part 135 rules, different sets of rules. And it's interesting because it could be the same aircraft, or same, I shouldn't say the same aircraft, but same type of aircraft. You know, a CRJ 700 flying under one set of rules versus the other set of rules. They can be slightly different, even though it's the same aircraft. So the more people we're carrying, the more things, the rules are going to get more restrictive. Again, we're looking for safety first. So Part 117, flight duty limitations. These are the rest requirements for flight crew members. We have a couple of people who've been in crew support in this class, right? Yeah. Bless the people who figure out the part 117. I feel like it's crazy, and it's probably because I've never applied myself in that, but there's just all these strange little nuances. So it's quite the calculations to keep track of. I am really happy that I work for a company that has a full and very robust crew support, and we don't have to actually make all those calculations. I do know some of those smaller things out or places out there may get dispatchers more involved. In my perspective, in my situation, my job is to maybe communicate with the crew support and ask them, is this crew going to be legal, especially if we've had a bunch of delays, it's late at night. There's the things I want to be, have that awareness that they could time out, because that can affect my flight in a pretty big way. So keeping and being aware that that's out there is important, even if you don't learn the exact details to it. Okay, so part 119, air carriers and commercial operators. So everyone, if you're seeing along this route, is going to have some sort of rules that they follow. So the operator is going to be like the company, and that we are organized in order to operate flights. So again, in my situation, in my job, I'm actually launching flights for 2 different operators. So it kind of becomes a little bit different. Air carriers, these are the companies, Delta, United, SkyWest, Allegiant, who's now buying Sun Country, whomever it is. So the part 121, like I say, this is the operating requirements for domestic, flag, and supplemental operations. So with these, the 121 rules, that's what you're going to spend a lot of your time learning here. So being aware of a lot of these, but like I say, we're not going to memorize them start to finish. We're going to give you the highlight reel for all these other parts. But 121 is legal to go. That's the ones that we're going to really pay attention for. And it's really the space that kind of turned us into dispatchers as a profession, really, was like really looking at these rules. And it sets us apart from other parts and other things that people might do similar, like Chris is doing some similar dispatch type things, but doesn't need to be certificated for it. Okay, part 121 is what kind of changes the rule there. So, okay, part 139, the certification of airports. Now, part 175, dangerous goods. Why would we need to have anything on dangerous goods? Any ideas? Okay, Mohammed.
Dangerous goods is going to affect if the aircraft is landing safely, because if something catches on fire, you know what I mean, it has to be packed up right. And there's a lot of precaution that goes into not only packing them, but just making sure that everything is following SOP and just ensuring the safety of everyone involved.
Okay. So, Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, he pretty much hit it. You do have to be careful of what you can put on an aircraft with other things. For example, there's certain things you can carry, but you can't carry passengers with that material. There's certain materials you can't carry together. So not that I don't think dispatchers really get too involved with that, but it is something to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely to be aware of. But like I say, once we get into, you could be working for a cargo airline that follows part 121 rules. That's a possibility. Now, but there's also the situation that there's dangerous goods out there that we do put on commercial flights with humans as well. So do anybody of you have lithium-ion batteries? Do any of you have computer batteries, extra batteries, things like that? Or if you have a carry-on that gets checked underneath for whatever reason, they ask you if it's got a battery in it that you got to take out. These all fall under dangerous goods. Dry ice would fall under dangerous goods. So there's a lot of rules around this because, like I say, generally, if like cargo carriers are probably, more impacted due to safety of flight issues, things like that, because of the higher volumes they can take. But even carrying certain airplane parts could be considered dangerous goods in their uninstalled positions. So you just being aware that is there. Fortunately, most commercial airlines that are passenger carrying have pretty strict rules as far as what they're even willing to attempt to carry. Like I say, on a daily basis, people have batteries, have things that do create problems. Working on the RAM, because that's where I started, we did have a suitcase or a duffel bag. It wasn't a suitcase; it was a duffel bag, and it came off the belt loader smoldering, actually. So nothing happened, fortunately, but there was a little smoke coming out of that bag because a battery had gotten all. It was when we undid the bag. It was all over the place. It was crazy. It's like oozing out weird stuff. So things happen. So we do need to be aware of that. Like I say, I would say, as a dispatcher, I don't deal with this information a ton, to be honest. And we are fortunate that we do have some extra people that are the experts, things like that. So that would be that. So kind of the way this works. So you're going to have the title. So 14. I don't really look at the titles often. Personally, I'm looking at that chapter part. So, but the Code of Federal Regulations is CFR. Part is the chapter. So part 121 dot section 533. And so you will see this referenced in company manuals, things like that. We have this policy because of 121.533 or whatever it is. And they will reference those things in the event that you have a question as to why it's there. Now, also, just to be a little bit clear with this, there is federal regulations. Everybody has to follow those at the minimum. And then there's going to be potentially some limitations that are placed on the operator that you're working for. For instance, the type of landings you can perform under your particular agreement with the FAA. And then you can also have company regulations. So I know, for instance, at SkyWest, there's a lot of things we make more difficult. We could do it this way, but we choose for safety of flight or to just make things more restrictive, that we will go above and beyond the rules. And I think all our airlines have a lot of things like that. So remember, there can be a difference between the company policy versus the federal regulations. So you will run into that, and they are sometimes nuanced, but those are things that are out there. So, okay, so this is kind of an interesting thing, just so you see the legalese, tech terms, and as in the writing of these. So words importing the singular include the plural. Words including the plural include the singular. What this kind of means is we're basically covering ourselves so that if we say like he versus she, we're basically saying all of it includes either whether it's a single thing or multiple. So it kind of the idea is we can't get around the rules saying, well, it said flight and I did 3 flights, so it doesn't count because it's flights. Or the vice versa. Well, it said on flights with an S, but I only did 1, so I don't have to follow the rules. And that's what that means, is they're kind of covering it and just blanketing in some basic information there. Shall is imperative. You need to do that. May is a permissive type thing. No person may not. You're not authorized is another way to do that. You're not permitted. And includes, meanings we're going to include X, Y, and Z. So they may give you a rule that there's a lot of examples on, but it also may not, it's not going to limit something else that would come out that somebody might interpret will come into that. So give me 1/2 second here. I just need to respond to somebody. Sorry about that. The weather just continues to be a drama. So, okay. With us, we have got a lot of acronyms. So that's the first thing. For those of you that are new to aviation, expect to learn another language, not even just be the terms, but we love to speak in acronyms. And I find myself, I remember this frustrated me in the beginning because I was trying to keep up with remembering them all, especially I knew a few coming from a station, but then moving forward to getting into dispatch. And now I find I will talk in all these acronyms, and then some people will look at me if they're not used to it and say, I don't actually understand what you meant. So we have all of this kind of terminology. Also, government agencies, they may have their own unique terminology. You may have some unique terminology to your company, some unique acronyms, things like that. So, for instance, the Global Navigation System, or GNS, you might also hear that referred to as GNSS, RNAV, GPS, GLONAV, RNAV. Like, there's a bunch of things that'll fall under the same thing. Don't let it be a frustration. Just be aware that we're going to have some different nuanced reasons that we're going to call stuff. Even when we get into our airplane parts, there's on different aircraft, there's a part that every aircraft has, but they call it slightly different things. So you'll hear it, you know, we'll call it one thing on the 700, but like an ERJ will call it another thing. It's the same thing. They just have a different acronym for it. So it's just like kind of starting to put those things, puzzles together. It takes a little bit of time, but we are good. So. So moving forward. Okay. So an air carrier is required to operate at a level that meets or exceeds regulations. So Lindsay's Airline, I decided to set up shop, and I'm going to fly into, I'm going to set up a new airline right here in St. George, and we're going to be a little crazy. And I've looked at all these rules and say, you know what? I don't like this one and this one. It makes it too hard for me to make money. I can't do that. If I give my basic rules and I comply with all those, but I say that, hey, I want it to be harder than this because I'm a little nervous about safety or for whatever reason, or the type of aircraft or the type of operation I'm running, I can always make it harder. So I say, you'll hear us say a lot, what is more restrictive? We can never be less restrictive than the federal regulations. We can only be more restrictive. So sometimes the FARs are something that direct a procedure. So based on this regulation, we're going to create a company procedure that will make sure and ensure that we follow that and we cannot break that. I know at SkyWest, we build a lot of tools that become our procedures, but also, software programs and little things that help us do better at not breaking them for things that we might miss or we might get stuck on. Procedures can be met with technique. Technique can be approved method of compliance. So flight following, what that means is kind of some wordiness to say flight following and planning software. All of this stuff can help for the FARs. We're not going to make anybody do this on paper. Everything gets approved eventually by the FAA for what we're going to use. I can't, when my new airline, just start having my neighbor build up a little app and it's going to fix everything and nobody really knows about it. I've got to make sure that that's approved and that it's going to meet what I'm trying to get it to do. So these different techniques, these practices, these ways that we train people, the internal policies we create, all of these different things, best practices are all going to come back to a method to make sure we don't violate the FARs. And again, we don't want to do that, especially in this test, but I try to avoid it every day. It's not a good idea. Now, will some of you at some point launch a flight that needed an alternate and it didn't? Like legally needed one? Yeah, it's all going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us. We try not to do it. It is going to happen on occasion. But most companies are looking at the data for when those things happen so that they can build better procedures and they can build better tools. Just like getting better performance. For instance, at SkyWest, we actually created a parser, that will literally highlight for us and read data and tell us in this moment, is that runway wet based on what's called TALPA information. And it actually highlights it and makes it a crazy color for us. So it's really easy to see. So as long as I'm doing my procedure and I'm doing my job and I'm opening that up, it makes it so much easier. Now, could I have read it before? Just fine. Yes, all plain English. It's all fine. It's in its little code, but I could read it. That this just was a way the company decided and said, gosh, we're missing a lot of this. We're missing, especially when, something happens and there's a delay and we have to regenerate a release. People are missing those wet runways. And so we just created a policy and a procedure within a software program that would alert us and bring it to our attention much more quickly so that we would miss few of those things. So like I say, the whole point of this is to get us to the point that we're following those FARs. It's a constant development. I'd say even the tools in the last 3 years are pretty crazy with what they've come up with. So it's kind of interesting to watch. So, okay. Operations specifications, also known as the op specs. Has anybody heard of these? Brian, what are op specs?
Yeah, well, I've heard of them due to studying for the ADX.
Okay, so at least you heard the word ADX. Good job. Anybody?
Yeah.
Anybody else have heard of these, or just from the ADX? Okay, this is the authorization for me and my little Lindsay airline that I'm starting. This is my authorization, my limitation, the procedures in which I'm going to follow. It's all of the way that I am allowed to operate my business. It is going to tell me all of the tails that I can have. It's going to tell me tails, meaning aircraft. It'll tell me specifically, not just, hey, Lindsay can, fly a CRJ 700. I'm going to have to list exactly which tail, registration, and all the information. And that's all I can do. It's going to tell me which airports I can go to. It's going to tell me what type of landing minimums I'm able to go down to. For instance, we'll talk a lot about the Instrument Landing System, ILS. And as we get into navigation, we'll spend a lot of time looking at that when we're building flight plans. And there's 3 categories. There's category 1, category 2, and category 3. And 3 is separated into 3 different subparts, A, B, and C. So in SkyWest, I can do Cat 1. That's how you'll hear that abbreviated. I can do Cat 2. Delta, they get crazy. They get to go to Cat 3. Now, Breeze, they only get to go to Cat 1 at this point. Now, the FAA gives us a start place, and then they're going to allow you to apply to do additional things. Again, let's not give everybody everything until they prove they can do a good job, basically, kind of think of it that way. So it's going to tell me exactly the type of operation that I can conduct. Am I passenger carrying? Am I carrying cargo? Am I going to do supplemental flights, which we'll talk about? And, what type of things it's going to give me. Basically, it's kind of, think of it as the FAA version of my business license. Tells me what I can do. It makes sure it identifies where I live as far as my business. It's going to give all of this information, and it does have to be approved or disapproved by the FAA. Any changes is kind of a joint document, and there's going to be several different exemptions to the regulations. Now that gets interesting, right? So we have these rules, but if the FAA says, okay, you can not follow this rule, but you must have these conditions in place. For instance, we're going to talk about high minimums captains. And for us, we have a exemption with high minimums captains. I can't always apply it because I have to follow all the rules to make it happen, but that's something that's given to us through the operations specifications or op specs. You will hear a lot of things like the C70 list. So that's the airports we can fly to. So I can't just get up and fly to any old airport. I can't just be like, well, the runway's long enough, I should be good. It has to be authorized, or we have to go through a process to allow it to be an airport that we can utilize for whatever reason. So there's a long process like this, but you will hear C70 quite a bit. So, and like I say, the FAA evaluates the merits of this whole thing. They're going to look at my application. They're going to look at, you know, everything I've put in, what exemptions I want. They're going to tell me what I can and can't have. And they are going to say, okay, let's go ahead and get you started with these 4 tails flying to these 10 cities. I don't know. I'm kind of making this up as I go. So that's kind of what that is, but it really sets it up as a company. So you will find when you get to wherever you just end up dispatching, the op specs will tell you what you're authorized to do. And then you will have some sort of policy manual that is also approved that will tell you how to do it. So it's what I can do versus how do I do it. So kind of a couple of different things there. The operations specifications, they must have an operator's manual, and it'll be set by the air carrier. So that's my airline, that's Lindsay's airline, and to be more specific. So this is that idea that how to do what it is that you've been authorized to do. So it's some sort of, you're going to have, like for us, we have a dispatch manual, we have a flight ops manual, we have all of these different policies that all come back to what we are authorized to do and how do we make sure that that is what happened, and those are our procedures to do that. So little example, so with the de-ice program, and I'm going to just read this for you, except as provided in paragraph D of this section, no person may dispatch, release, or take off an aircraft anytime conditions are such that frost, ice, or snow may reasonably be expected to adhere to the aircraft, unless the certificate holder has an approved ground de-icing, anti-icing program in its operations specifications, and unless the dispatch, release, and takeoff comply with that program. So the FAR is going to tell us that CFR is going to say, hey, you've got to be able to de-ice or you just can't fly there. And that's just kind of a, you know, that's kind of a drop dead rule there. So what I'm going to do, if my little airline, I'm going to take the regulation. I am going to get authorization to do de-icing program, and I'm going to build all of that into my rules. Then I'm going to have an operator's manual that's going to be how we're going to apply all these rules. I'm going to go through that process on every little thing that we do. It is cumbersome. It's interesting. I feel like I'm a airline that does pivot fairly quickly, but even that quickly takes time. There's always a procedure that you've got to go through. You always want to make sure that, you know, everything is kind of, you know, what's that word, the I's dotted and the T's crossed, things like that. So with that process, and then you're going to do this, like I say, with everything. So now as a dispatcher, I'm going to worry about, you know, the anti-ice. I'm going to worry about taxi time for de-icing. I'm going to make sure that that I have planned accordingly so that plane can be de-iced. Now there's going to be another manual for the actual ground program and what type of fluids we will accept and what kind of training needs to be done to actually de-ice the aircraft. So there's departments outside of just the dispatch that is going to have to adhere to all of these regulations, if that makes sense. So huge thing. And I can take you an example for some of the 121 flights that we run on our charter side. Because like I say, I do those charters specifically. Every place that we go, every FBO that's different than a station, because all of our stations are organized. You know, we're working with United, we're working with Delta. It's all pretty clear cut. The ground handlers have gone through extensive training. Now, if we go to, say, Atlantic Aviation, we have to reach out to them and we have to make sure their training matches our training or better. Either that or we have to give them our training before we can ever send a plane there. And if not, if they won't comply with that, we are not able to send that plane there if there is expected de-icing, because we can't really take off with ice on the wings. It's a bad idea. So it's kind of going through that process. You know, like I say, stations, for any of you who've worked at stations, raise of hands. I think there were a few people that had worked ground handling. Few or thumbs up or something. Oh, wait. I'm getting people confused. So even, okay, Gary, okay, good. At least a couple of people there, one person there. So the amount of training you do for every little thing, and you have to do it every year, that's all comes back to this regulation. You've got an ops specs, and then you've got the operator's manual. So you've got to be able to make sure it all works backwards and it all comes down to everything follows regulation. So, okay, we're going to go into the next part of 121 rules. Just so it's a little less awkward on timing, I'm going to have you guys just kind of take your first break now, if that's okay. Let's come back at 30 to make it easy. And then we'll see how we go on the next one, but we'll move into the next manual of 121 stuff. I'm on mute. Did we get everybody back? Couple more minutes. So this is just like firing a warning shot. Okay, one more minute. Get a little chug-a-lugga, some beverage, some snacky snacks. Took my niece, feels like a year ago or so, to Iceland. And when we got there, this poor girl was so tired. And I said, what do you need? I said, what do you want to do? And she said, all she could say is snacky snack and nappy nap. I kind of feel like I could do a snacky snack and nappy nap tonight.
Sounds like a Wednesday to me.
Exactly. And in aviation, you know, when you get into aircraft, sometimes you like to do a swappy swap. Give me a new aircraft. So, yeah. So yeah, for funsies up in like Chicago, South Bend, that area now, they're experiencing really high winds. So we just spoke briefly about de-icing. They're having a hard time even keeping up on de-icing right now. So they just can't keep the snow off. So it's kind of been a wild day for weather up there. Just like I say, winter operations, unique challenges, as well as summer, very different unique challenges. So, okay, we're going to zip into a couple more of these parts. So let's see if I can make this work. Do, 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 do. I got to check my screen because sometimes I talk and it's not going yet. Okay, we good. So, okay, so we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but that's because we like to keep you guessing. So part one, biggest part of this one, these are all of our abbreviations or definitions. They give us the kind of the fundamentals that we need to know. The whole point is, so are we all talking about the same thing when we talk? And that's that consistent, or the idea is consistent interpretation and application of the rules. So, and it's interesting that we bring that up, right? Because there's oftentimes debate between different carriers, between different FAA members, between FAA and carriers and things like that about this is the way I read this rule and this is the way to apply it. And at the end of the day, whoever is the inspector in charge of my Lindsay New Airplane is going to ultimately be the one that's going to listen when I say, well, I interpret it this way. And they'll either say, no, Lindsay, you were wrong, or no, this is how we interpret it as well. So there is room for interpretation. However, with using proper terms, with using similar language, the idea is to make these clear so that we all kind of believe they are the same thing. So, okay, so like I say, it's that clear understanding. It gives us that interpretation, and it's also a little bit of a foundation. So there are like hundreds of acronyms and abbreviations, and that's not even getting into like airport codes and all the other extra things. So we're going to use all kinds of different things. You can actually Google search aviation acronyms. You can find all kinds of stuff out there. They are actually on the FAA website. You can find all of these acronyms that are commonly used, things like that. So, but these are going to go from A to, they actually end at V. They don't go to Z, but they end up, BORTAC is the last one, but there's all kinds of different terms and acronyms in there. So we will try and introduce you to a lot of these throughout the course. I'm here to tell you we won't get through everything just because there's so much out there. There's still days today where somebody will say something and I actually have to Google search it because I'm not 100% sure, you know, what that is. Or maybe there's one I've heard it before, but I can't remember what it stands for. That's really common for me. It's like I know what it is, but I can't remember like what the actual thing means. Don't be afraid to get up on Google and, you know, start looking at things. You know, like I say, I know that was a study strategy for me just in this class, but I still use it. My first year of dispatching, like I had like a little notepad on my computer that I could save like the little notes on. And it's interesting, like I would just even put terms, like something I heard or, you know, that wasn't an immediate thing that I needed. And I just write it down and then I would kind of chase and figure out what was next. You know, I might like go through at the end of the week and I would just start looking those up on Google. I'd chase a couple of YouTube videos. I would do things just kind of at home so I could get more educated and things like that. And it was surprising that that list would get really long. And then I'd have to go like start figuring out what some of them are. So just an idea if that's something that helps you. So one of the first ones that we're going to see a lot is operational control. Okay, so this is the authority to initiate, conduct, or terminate a flight. Bing the bell, winky winky, honk the horn, whatever it is. If everybody can please try and remember that or write that down and then remember it, and not just remember it, but be able to let it roll off your tongue. Like quickly, we're going to see this over and over again. Operational control, it's the exercise of authority over initiating, conducting, or terminating a flight. Both the PIC and the dispatcher have operational control. This is specifically what sets us apart as dispatchers versus all of the other roles that we could do that could have similar type job things that we could do, flight following, working for different groups where you don't need that certificate. So it's kind of a big deal to have this. It defines us as a profession. So you will see things like, you know, like night. We actually have to define the time when there's sunset, when there's, you know, sundown, sunrise, all of these things, that civil twilight. So we're actually looking at those become very well defined. Some other terms that you're going to see, you're going to have this ground visibility. Okay, so how far can I see in front of me? I'm going to have flight visibility. So how far from the cockpit can they see in front of them? Common things, we're going to talk about visibility and ceilings all day long. Ceilings, the cloud. Think of it being a hat on my head right here, right? It's the cloud layer. It's the lowest level of broken or overcast cloud is my ceiling. Now my ceiling could be 500 feet or it can be, you know, 26,000 feet. It can be way up there that those clouds are there, wherever it is, but that's wherever it is my ceiling. Okay, that's, like I say, think of it as the hat. So, but it's got to be broken or overcast. I've got a few clouds floating along as we go. That's not a ceiling. You know, scattered clouds, those are all still good days for us. So those we're going to talk about these consistently. And I'm losing my train of thought. It's going to help us define what our minimums are. Are we legal to go constantly by this ground visibility, visibility, and ceiling? Ceiling also can be known as vertical visibility, so up and down. So does everybody kind of conceptually see the difference? Because we kind of just rambled through that of visibility versus ceiling. Does anybody have a question on that? On what is what? No? So, okay. So again, ceiling up here, visibility, how far I can see here. Okay, so some of those basic things, because we're going to start talking a little bit about some of the minimums and things like that. So, okay, some IFR conditions. Okay, instrument flight rules conditions. That's what IFR stands for, instrument flight rules. We are going to be doing IFR flight plans in this class, instrument flight rules, flight plans, and that's how we're going to be proceeding ahead with our flight plans, even if it's beautiful 10 and clear day. That's our type of plan that we are doing. So this is going to be less than 1,000 feet above ground and less than 3 statute miles of visibility. So 1,000-foot ceiling, 3 statute miles. Okay, that's kind of the way I'm working. Is if I have that, that's my instrument flight rules. We will have visual flight rules that we will talk about. We will have marginal flight rules that we will have talk about, these types of things. So that's a good one to remember, that winky IFR conditions. So the administrator is, think of them, this is the FAA. They're the ones that are our administrator, and they're the ones that are delegated to have authority over all things aviation related. Air traffic control. It's funny when you talk about being a dispatcher, outside of anybody in aviation, you're going to probably get, oh, so you're going to work in the tower. Okay. Air traffic control. These are the people that are going to control the airspace. Some of them, you know, may happen to have dispatch certificates, but that's not, they're not necessarily dispatchers, or they're not dispatching. They're doing a different role. So it's just a common misconception. So air traffic controllers, they're going to promote the safety, control the airspace. These are our traffic lights a lot. They're going to be the ones that advise crews to slow down, speed up, you know, maybe take a different vector into land. They kind of manage the ground movement control, things that are going on. They're going to make sure all these planes are, the traffic is conducted in a way that's safe, and it's going to get everybody into where they're wanting to go ideally. So precision approach. Okay, so this is an instrument approach. Like I say, we're just doing some highlight reels of definitions here. The precision approach, we're going to talk a lot about this in navigation. This is something like the ILS, or Instrument Landing System, and it provides both lateral and vertical guidance, meaning it's going to functionally tell the aircraft, you know, how on path it is going up and down. Okay, so this vertical as well as lateral, side to side. So it's kind of triangulating them in and helping guiding them in to the runway to land in a good space. So, okay. So that's kind of a general idea. I literally gave you the Reader's Digest version. So get really comfortable learning these terms as we go. Don't worry anything outside of what I said operational control, because we're going to probably go over it a few more times. That's going to be something you're going to see over and over and over. But all of these terms you're going to learn about in specific sections of this course. So airworthiness. Okay, we dropped into this for just a few minutes. So this is talking about the aircraft. Okay, so any jets that have 10 or more seats and they have a max takeoff weight, or MTOW, you'll see that abbreviation, greater than 12,500 pounds. Okay, propeller-driven airplanes with greater than 19 seats, or MTOW greater than 19,000 pounds. So that's what we're looking for under this Part 25, is those type of aircraft. Okay, we're going to make sure and set up a group of rules that's going to make sure that they get the proper maintenance checks, that they are organized, that things are getting repaired as needed, that we are not duct taping this thing back together and saying go. So we want to make sure that the flight, they're going to have the performance, stability, ground handling, all the characteristics they need. They need to have the structural limits. They need to have all of the controls, the flight controls, the maneuvers that they're able to do. They've got to have all of the systems for ground handling, things like that need to be organized. The design, the construction. So like I say, now let's say I'm not going to start an airline. If I'm going to start Lindsay's airplane company and I'm going to build a new airplane, by the way, it's a horrible idea, but I'm going to have to present my design. I'm going to have to present my construction plan. I'm going to have to present my all of these structural limits, all of these, that I have all of the important things for flight. I've got all of the ability to get the people off the plane. I mean, we've got to get that detailed, right? Like, how am I going to get them off? How am I going to get them on? How is it going to be safe on the ground, in air, in all of these parts? The engines, what type of engines am I going to put on these? Or power plants, you'll hear them called oftentimes. What type of equipment, what kind of limitations am I going to have because of my aircraft? You know, you've probably seen, I think there's a lot of buzz in the news about like electric aircraft. Have anybody seen any of that stuff? So kind of a cool idea, right? You know, like I can't even imagine like the jet fuel saved on that, but those things have a lot of other limitations. So you need to be very clear when you're building your new aircraft what those limitations are. You need to have all of the electricity, the wiring, any additional things that are out there. Like, it gets very specific on this. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to have proof of compliance. Okay, so we do have to, with our aircraft, like we're going to follow Part 25 rules, where we're going to prove that any aircraft that we're going to buy and we're going to maintain in that position, or if I'm going to have Lindsay's building airplanes company, we're going to make sure that they have the performance, we need to know exactly what the stall speeds are. How fast do they take off? How fast do they climb? What is their stall speed? What's their en route speeds? What are their landing capabilities? How fast, you know, like I say, what is my, I said that already. Stability, longitudinally, like, you know, how stable are these planes? Stalls are a big thing that have to be really looked into, because we don't enjoy that in flight, to have stall warnings, or even a stall even worse. So like ground, like water handling, like all of these little its and bits. Miscellaneous stuff would be like vibration, bufferings, high speed out, trim or out of trim characteristics. So these are all things you're going to learn about in MELs and systems. So, you know, like all of these things come into the Part 25 part. The structural strength of this aircraft. Has anybody been in Texas to like the Bell helicopter plant? I think they've got kind of a cool little tour you can do. Has anybody done that? So, you know, here they've got a lot of structures around the airplane in this picture right here. So if you ever get a chance to go to Bell, it's kind of a cool experience, and they will take whatever they're building when they're trying to make sure that they're following these Part 25 rules, and they built actually a whole other engineered contraption. And basically what they do is shake the crap out of the airplane or the helicopter or whatever it is. And they want to basically simulate X number of takeoffs and landings and all the stress that's going to happen to that aircraft. And then they are going to see, you know, what falls apart, what bolts come out, what's the problem? Does the aircraft stay together after we take off and land all of these times? How many cycles can it do? You know, and then they will, you know, do a lot of testing on these things. Like, what can we do to improve? Like they also do this at Bell Helicopter, where they, you know, launch the chickens in like they're dead, don't worry. They're like, you know, the butterball, the turkeys and chickens, and they launch them up there, see what happens when we have a bird strike. So, you know, all of these things are the tests that are going to go into the safety of aircraft, and that we are going to prove when I make my little airplane company that I have got the conditions on my aircraft. I've got the emergency landing procedures. I've got everything organized with that. And that's heavy on the manufacturer to make sure this is initiated. So a lot of times you will find like an aircraft, it's, you know, it's broken. You know, you find out you're dispatching a flight and the aircraft has an issue on it, and the mechanical control folks call you up and say, hey, we have to get a hold of the manufacturer of this part, because we need to make sure that they are verifying that we can defer this, or if this is something we can fix, or are we able to do X, Y, and Z with this? So we're also looking at even the design and the construction, like how do they even, you know, manufacture this? What type of fabrication methods? There's all kinds of different fabrications out there, and it's changed a lot. Like we try to make them a little lighter where we can, but it's also interesting, you know, because of some of the manufacturing now, something could be like a little small dent on the outside, but it could end up being a big dent on the inside just because of the way the materials respond. So being able to be very clear with all of those fabrication, the types of materials, things like that. What are the strength of all the surfaces? How are they installed? I mean, this gets down to literally every bolt. I feel like there's a really good documentary. I think it was might have been on YouTube, and it was like the making of the A380. So very big plane. It's a really interesting documentary where, and I'm sure it's on other channels and stuff. I just realized, I think I watched it on YouTube though, but it was, I mean, they went through like every part of the process and building this thing out, and the miles and miles and miles of wires that are in this thing. And how they got this beast of an aircraft that is just huge, and how they made it, and how they made it safe, and how they made it able to fly, and all of those things. This is all of their following these Part 25 rules and making sure that they're in compliance with everything. Landing gear, how it's made, what is the braking system, how does it retract it up? Like say little tiny planes, the gear just hangs down, right? It doesn't really work that way on these big planes. It's too much drag for us. So we need to fold it up inside. But again, we need it to be highly reliable to come back out where we can land, right? Definitely a part of the aircraft that we want to work pretty well for safety of landing. So what about like, emergency stuff, ditching, evacuation, you have to have plans for these. And whether your aircraft is going to be going like over the water, or if it's going to, they may have different rules based on the equipment that's on board. For instance, when we used to fly to certain places, like up in Alaska, we had to have certain equipment on board for safety, and that had to be designed by the manufacturer. You just don't, if they tell you you need a life raft for your plane, you can't just go to Walmart and buy one. It's got to be specifically manufactured. I dealt with some people that did a lot with private planes many years ago, and it was interesting that I remember them talking about they were having to get the like pillows approved by the FAA, and like the blankets that they were going to put in there, like it gets very specific, even on the interiors. So ventilation, heating, pressurization, big one, fire protection, big one. So power plant, this is what we're going to call, these are our engines. So what are the vibrations? When do they fatigue? How do we restart the engines when they go out? How does the fuel flow? What do they, what are the pumps like? How does it filter? How does the oil drain out? How does the cooling system work and to keep these these power plants going? What is the exhaust? What is our fire protection if there is an issue? There's a lot of combustion going through these engines. So what happens when something goes wrong? And that's the whole point of these rules, is not to solve everything, because there's always going to be something that surprises. We can't plan for everything that's out there, but have we thought through enough things and what are our holy crap situations that how we can have a procedure to deal with it. So the equipment that's on the aircraft, there's a little flight deck there for you. Okay, we've got the navigation equipment, you've got engine indicators, you've got different system indicators. Like, I mean, think of the dashboard on your car, right? And if any of you have an electric car, that becomes even bigger, right? Where it's just like, it's kind of telling you everything that's going on. Airplanes just do more of it. They're going to monitor every part of this. They're going to tell them what the, what's the situation with the icing, the oxygen levels, the pressurization, the temperatures, it gives them all of this information through a series of parts that we're going to talk about next week. The flight data recorder, okay, the FDR things, you'll hear like the black box, we're going to record everything that's going on in flight. We're going to record everything that's going on in the cockpit. Again, it's not to be a stalker, but it is for safety of flight. If there is an incident, it's kind of helpful to be able to go out and find out what happened to the best of our ability. I'm going to be honest, I probably couldn't be on that team. I feel like it would be interesting, but I think it would pull my heartstrings a little too much. But yeah, we want to know what happens. It gives us records so we can learn and we can grow and we can change. So the subpart G, this is going to be our limitations. So speed, power, the crew limitations, ETOPS. Like we won't go over ETOPS in this class very much. This is going to be extended over water operations. The joke is that stands for engines turn or people swim. So like I said, we won't visit that. But if you work for an airline that does that type of operation, like I say, a lot of cargo people get people up on ETOPS pretty quickly. A lot of, if you're going to do international stuff, if you work for like Hawaiian, things like that, they do a lot of stuff over the water. So placards and markings, and then it's going to come down to manuals, like how do you fly this airplane, and all of the mechanical manuals and all of the, QRH manuals. You'll hear that one pop up. The quick reference handbook manual. So that's going to be a manual that comes with every airplane on what procedures they take when things go wrong during flight. As dispatchers, we're never going to try and say, well, try and flip this switch or try and flip that switch or try and do this. We're not trying to figure that out. They have a step-by-step procedure and they're going to go through that if something goes wrong. Even if they get an error message and they send a message, like a little text message through the ACARS down to the mechanics, the mechanics are going to straight up say, follow the QRH and write it up on the ground. That's going to be the direction. We don't want to waste their bandwidth trying to monkey with something. We want a very clear checklist that will help them get through that process so that they understand exactly what's happening. And and like I say, sometimes the QRH says, do this, part A, B, C, and D, whatever those procedures are. And if none of these work, land at the safest or nearest suitable airport. Sometimes it will say, continue to destination. So all of those things are in there, but those manuals all have to be part of the airworthiness. I think somebody might have a hot mic. I keep getting a little bit of sound there. So, okay, electro wiring, we're going to breeze through this. Man, I want no part of learning about this, to be honest. Making sure that all of the wires, aircraft go through extreme conditions, extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme vibration, turbulence, all of the things that happen. We want to make sure all of these connections are good, they're tight, but like they say, it gets down to that specific. Like I say, subpart H, there's a whole part that is just about the electrical systems and how they're all going to fit together. So it's a lot going on there. So I'm going to close that. We're kind of nope, wrong thing. Sorry, did it kick us off? It did. See, I don't love this new system here. Here we go. There we go. Very good. Okay. So we've kind of sound dropped a few things. We're going to get a little bit more into some memorization here. So that's kind of the oversweeping view. We have not necessarily even touched FARS, to be honest, but kind of the idea of how it's laid out. So we're going to kind of dial in a little bit for a while here and look at the specific Part 121 regulations. Okay, so these are the operating requirements for domestic, flag, and supplemental operations. Okay, we'll talk about some of these let's actually talk about those kind of right now so we kind of have that general idea. So domestic is going to be anything I'm going to do here in my country. So flying around the US from, Chicago to Denver to Atlanta to Salt Lake, wherever it is. Domestic operations. Flag operations would be the international flying. I'm going to go from Denver to Montreal in Canada, or I'm going to go from Atlanta down to, Texas, Mexico City, wherever it is. So those are going to be the flag operations. And then we're going to have supplemental operations. This is going to kind of fall into everything else. These are going to be our unscheduled, typically additional things that we can do. This can fall into several different things for SkyWest, as well as a lot of other carriers, this is going to be like these charters, these on-demand flights for whatever reason. So that's what we do on part of our charter side, is we run them as 121 supplemental operation when we run them under our SkyWest certificate. So those are going to be, we follow all the 121 rules plus the additional rules that are in the supplemental that add to that. So there's a few interesting rules that are slightly different than we do for our regular scheduled flights that are going all over the place. So different types of flights that we can do. So I already brought this up once, but this is going to be the winky winky, ring the bell. Make sure to look at this. Operational control. Operational control is the exercise of authority over initiating, conducting, and terminating a flight. Please let this roll off your tongue. Have it so memorized, even by tomorrow, that you're going to hear this question. It's going to probably be in every interview you ever have. It's going to be in every test you ever have. It's just something that's always there. Like I say, what I was saying earlier, this really defines us as a profession. This operational control means that the pilot in command and I, we have to be in agreement on the plan. We're in this together. If something goes wrong, I can't put my hands up and say, sorry, that was all him. That's not me. I have this operational control. Now, once he gets up in the air, he's going to have that final decision. He's up there. He's seen what's going on. He has to be able to make the decision based on what's going on at the moment, what's going on with the aircraft, what he's seen, what his abilities are, what he feels comfortable with, all of these different things. But with that pre-planning, like I've got to be engaged with it. I've got to make sure that he and I agree. We may have differences. Like I say, you have to decide at any given moment, is that, worth a fight or not? Like I say, I'm not a fighter when it comes to this. I also, like I say, I think I said last night that I dispatch in a way that I joke and say, if I'm getting phone calls, I'm not doing my job right, which is not totally true, right? There's going to be instances that you have to call, but I try to kind of think forward to what I think they would want, because I'm looking at all the weather, I'm looking at everything going on, I'm watching what's happening at the airport it's going into, and I'm going to relay that information that this is why I did what I did. There's 2-hour de-ice, lines right now in Detroit. So I'm going to give him all this taxi out fuel to be able to do that. I'm going to let him know that that's why I did that, is, current, taxi time wait is this much time, or de-icing time. Give that information. There's that VIP movement. The president's flying in when we're going to be going into Washington, D.C. We're going to go into Dulles, and there's going to be VIP movement in the area. So I gave him hold fuel, and I'm going to explain that on the release as to why. If I give a discretionary alternates, we talked a little bit about that last night. And, if I'm going to do that, I'm not just going to throw it on there, because it is more things for me to be able to watch. But it's also, if I feel it's necessary and I feel there's a good reason, I'm going to explain to him why. Now, he can call and say, I've only ever once that I've been dispatching call and had a guy said, why did you put this alternate on? I don't think it's necessary. It's happened once. And apparently it was one of the old cowboys, and, he liked to do it his way, and he liked to kind of have that thing, whichever. Most people I probably more often have people call in and say, hey, can you give me an alternate? Even though there's no good reason or whatever, if they feel more comfortable with it, I don't mind doing it. So, but like I say, we have to have those conversations, and, they can't a pilot just can't call and be like, hey, talk to his first officer and say, hey, let's figure out more fuel. Let's tell the fueler, the dispatcher wants 5,000 pounds of fuel, but I want 10,000. Let's just go and do it. And we just won't tell them about it. That's part of that operational control. We do have to have these discussions so that we know what's going on, so that we can replan performance, so we can make sure everything's organized. So this is, like I say, this is the cornerstone to how it works. And so it's a cool job because of that. It gives you, you're an important role to keeping the plane safe. There's a lot of times, and talking to different pilots, there's a lot of times just checking in with them and knowing they've got somebody on the ground. In my case, maybe being a little stalker, but somebody who's there and has their back. They're not up there alone. It may feel like it when it's a stressful situation, you know, but there's been times where, you know, you're kind of helping them pick through a storm, you know, so they can try and get through. And it's like, because a pop-up thunderstorm happened. So communication is a constant thing that you're going to be in. But like I say, understanding that this job does have importance. It's not just, you know, you don't just generate a paper and, you know, as soon as I filed them all, they're all good. So, okay, these domestic, flag, and supplemental. So we've got our scheduled flights in the country, flag or published scheduled flights. And what that means by published scheduled flights is somebody can get on and get a ticket. Somebody can somehow get organized to when this is going to happen. It could be like the cargo companies, both UPS and FedEx run under Part 121 rules. So, but their schedule is published. It's out there. Like people can't go buy tickets per se, but everybody knows it's out there. They know when they're going. People can choose to put freight on their planes accordingly and book those services, and everybody kind of, it's organized that way. Supplemental, that's the Wild West. That's the unscheduled, the on-demand type things that, like I say, falls under charter quite a bit for most airlines. That's what we do. We run a handful of charter flights on a 135 certificate, and then we run a handful of charter flights that are actually running on our airline planes with our airline crew, all these 121 rules. So different groups of people, different rules, different things that we're doing. That's what the supplemental, they are not published. They are not scheduled as far as something that's a routine. Might be scheduled for tomorrow, but not something that we're going to see every month or a schedule that's gone out for an extended period of time. So each certificate holder is responsible for operational control. Okay, so this is another good thing to remember. Bing, bing. The PIC and the dispatcher are jointly responsible for pre-flight planning, delays, and dispatch release of a flight. Okay, you'll hear the acronym PPDD. That's a good way to remember it. So the question you're going to get are, what are the joint responsibilities of the PIC and dispatcher? And you all are going to say, don't turn your sound off, but say it with me, pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch release. Okay, that's what we've got to do together. We're going to make sure the flight is good. We both agree on things that are going. Now, I see some funky weather and or some issues that I have. I may call up the captain and say, hey, I think you're going, if we hang on, we'll have a better, if we go about 30 minutes later, maybe we don't need an alternate. That'll make the difference of being able to take all the passengers or not. We delay, maybe we will get a better shot of getting in and less risk of diversion, things like that. So talking that through is something that we're going to work through together. And we are both going to sign that release, which will be the document that has all of the flight plan, all the details, and all the things on it. Okay. So the aircraft dispatcher alone is responsible. And again, winky, winky, good thing to remember. Monitor the progress of each flight. We are going to issue necessary information for the safety of flight. And we're going to cancel or redispatch if, in the opinion of the dispatcher or the PIC, the flight cannot continue or operate safely. So MIC, Mike, you'll hear different ways. That's a good little way to remember it. Monitor the progress of each flight, issuing the necessary safety information, and cancel or redispatch. Okay. So what does this kind of mean? So monitoring the progress of the flight. So I'm going to put a release in the system. I plan my flight. I've got all my plan in place. I know how much fuel. I know where my alternates are. I know kind of what my game plan in my head, if something goes wrong, things like that. I kind of have that in the back of my head. I'm good. Then, a little while later, the crew shows up and they're going to go ahead and do all their checks. Now, it's actually my job to pay attention. Well, he's in there and he just wrote up a plane or an issue that something is broken. He wants the mechanics to come out and give it a check. It's, I've got to be monitoring that progress. I may want to see, gosh, your plane's out of service. Hey, sir, what's going on? What are you seeing? And he'll tell me, okay, we wrote up this is what happened. Okay, I can give that information on. The plane gets fixed, then taxis on down. Well, gosh, I should know. Well, the plane's not in the air, but they've been on the ground for a long time, but they blocked out. So where are they? I'm going to want to know where they are. I might go look on my different tools and find out, oh, it looks like they're sitting on the de-ice pad in Chicago, waiting behind 30 other planes. Okay, now that I understand what's going on. I can relay that information as needed. I also are going to want to watch that plane even on the ground, because there's a point that they may have to turn around and get too much or more fuel if I didn't plan them enough to taxi all that time. So constantly monitoring that. And then of course, when they get into the air, I kind of want to have, I can't sit and stare at them because I've got all these other little tasks I'm doing, a lot of different planes in the air, but I kind of want to have that idea of where are they? Are they visually where I would expect them to be? I can check in with the different software programs. Like, are they having higher winds than we expected? I can look through all of these types of things because I may have to change our plan. We may need to make changes. We may need to even change stuff while they're en route, because we have information that's happening live that we didn't predict because we didn't know. So being able to watch that, and I feel like you can say you're a good dispatcher when truly anybody can come up and say, hey, what's happening with this flight? You can look and quickly say, oh, this is what's going on. They were delayed because of this mechanical issue or whatever it is. Things are going to happen that are going to surprise you. But like I say, it should never be in that situation that, 20 minutes after they've landed at some weird place, you find out, like somebody asked, why did they land in Piedmont, North Dakota? They were handed to Chicago. And the answer should never be, I don't know, no idea. Like I say, we've got to monitor that progress. Issuing necessary information for the safety of flight. Hey, there's a lot of holding going on in Chicago, just so you know. I'll keep an eye on it, but you may start being slowed down. You may, start watching for these things. I'm seeing 20 minutes ahead of you. I'm seeing quite a bit of turbulence reports at this flight level. I'm hearing that this flight level above you is getting good rides. And I might want to give them a burn if I go to a higher or a lower flight level. What does it do to their fuel burn? It could be, all flight levels are turbulent and rough right now. You may want to have your flight attendant sit down for the next 20 minutes. Then you should be out of that. So I'm going to give them that information. So cancel and redispatch. So I may have to change if I make a release and the conditions change, I may need to make a second release. I may need to amend things and change the plan. And it can be anything small to like really kind of changing it quite a bit. That's again, that decision when they call and say, hey, I need an alternate, or I don't like the alternate you picked for whatever reason, or I really need some extra hold fuel for this reason, you have those conversations. And that's when you're going to amend and do different things so that you can have a safe flight. Now, your name is on every release that you're going to put into the system. So that's something that, I will admit, I did frame my very first release that had my name on it. But yeah, it's just like kind of a process to go through and, watch these things. So if you get the question of what are the dispatcher's prime or sole responsibilities, you're going to say, everybody say it out loud with me, monitor the progress of each flight, issuing necessary information for the safety of flight, cancel or redispatch if in the opinion of the PIC, or the dispatcher, the flight cannot operate as planned. So MIC and PPDD, those are your two things. Like I say, you will see those a lot of times. Okay. So for this responsibility, during the flight time, the PIC is in command once they're in the air, and they are responsible ultimately for that aircraft, the crew, as well as all the cargo, all the passengers, that safety, damage to the aircraft, that's on them. And that's why we give them that ultimate authority for the operation of the aircraft without limitation over the other crew members and their duties during that flight pen. He could, even if he doesn't hold the valid certificates authorizing him to perform other duties, he has that control up in the air whenever he is the PIC, pilot in command. So, questions about that up to now? Okay. So the dispatcher is going to provide to the PIC all of the available current reports or info on airport conditions, irregularities of the navigation facilities, and anything that may affect the safety of flight. Okay. So we're going to want to make sure the current weather, the forecasted weather that has been recently, the most recent update that we have available. I don't want to give them yesterday's forecast because it may have changed today. I don't want to give them a report from 6 hours ago. I need to give them a report from the last hour. Want to make sure they have all of that information. I'm going to let them know what runways are closed. I'm going to let them know what that, hey, the ILS is out to runway 34, you know, so that they are aware, and they're also looking at these things, but we're going to make sure these are on the release. There'll be times, yeah, Brian.
Just real quick, things like that where if the ILS is out, is that something that's in a NOTAM?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I may have to, if something goes out in flight, I may have to let them know, you know, something changed, which does actually happen. We had a flight, you know, it was on our 121 charter that was heading in an airport lighting system. Went out because of a lightning strike. So lightning strike happened. So we had to land them somewhere else. So that stuff does happen in flight as well. But yes, that's the cool thing. You don't have to retype all these things. Most, not most, like operators are going to have some sort of software that pull that all into for you. Like I say, it seems cumbersome, and it will feel cumbersome when we're doing the specific flight plans. But we will go ahead and pull those in from whatever the approved sources are. And like I say, we have actually a client that we pull everything in through, and it actually categorizes for us and makes it all buttoned up and nice. So it's easy to read through things like that and gives that information to the pilots in a clean format. But we have to make sure they have that information. It's my job that when, you know, if something does not populate or pull onto the release in that information packet that I'm giving him, I need to make sure that I go find that for him. So you need all the available weather forecasts again, the METAR, the TAF, and anything that's kind of happening out there, any turbulence. So I'm going to make notes of areas of turbulence, thunderstorms brewing, things like that, any wind shear. I'm going to want him to be aware of, because they may not see that from what they're watching. They've got, you know, pretty decent eye on some of this stuff, but we just have additional tools. We want to make sure. It was interesting. We did this in our recurrent one year. I don't know, I feel like it's been a couple of years ago, where they paired us up, and we had to be like, so kind of on opposite computers. So we weren't, you know, like talking to each other, and they wanted to give like a little practice. So they gave one dispatcher a map, like a picture of a map with a really bad storm on it, and like our current route of where this flight was going. And it was like the other dispatcher was in the air. And so that dispatcher with the map would have to send me a little Teams message, just because they were typing it as if they were going to the ACAR system, to the aircraft, and tell me and explain that weather to me in a clear way that I would understand it. And then it was interesting because they gave us blank paper, or like just a blank map, and we had to draw on it what they were telling us. And it was interesting to see and to practice. We had to practice a few times with each other, and we switched partners and things like that. And it was interesting because like there was one of the times where the person describing to me something, and like I drew something totally different. So clearly we had a miscommunication. Same thing, you know, we got, after a few practices, we got to the point that we could use better language so that we could, you know, quickly and adequately tell them exactly where this was and what to expect and where I was rerouting them. So it become a challenging as you're trying to provide pilots this information. So again, during the flight, if there's additional weather available, any conditions, you know, there's a pop-up thunderstorm about 30 minutes ahead of you, you know, cells are building, things like that. Any irregularities that pop up along the route. Like I say, hey, Stillwater just took a lightning strike. They are closed. We're going to divert to, this, and I'm going to quickly give them all of that information. So if we have an unplanned diversion, okay, so lightning strike at the airport, I can't land there. The, airport lights are out, let alone all the landing equipment and things like that and lighting. So we went to another airport. And so, quickly that was a thing is here's the current weather. Here are the current NOTAMs that are applicable. Here is the information that you need to land safely at that airport. So we might change stuff along. Like I say, this happened or that happened, whatever it becomes that way. So, okay. No, for domestic and flag operations, no aircraft dispatcher may release a flight unless he is thoroughly familiar with the reported and forecast weather conditions on the route to be flown. So don't just let the computer figure it out. You're going to want to make sure you look and pay attention. Like I always build a route and I put it on my map with the weather and I look at it and I say, okay, is there anything I want to go around? And then I use a little time slider so I can see what's happening in 4 hours when this flight's actually landing there. What am I looking at? I want to know that's there. I also need to read all the weather. I want to make sure I have all the elements. You'll talk about that in the weather program, the parts that need to be there for the METAR. So if they're not there, or if the weather is 6 hours old, or, from yesterday, heaven forbid, a lot of times things aren't reporting, or things, systems go out for the automatic reporting, and we want to make sure that that is available. I mean, and it kind of makes sense because the pilot, just before they land, they're going to call for the kind of the weather in the minute. I can't even talk minute. And they'll look for this 5-minute METAR, where they're going to say what's happening basically right now, not what was happening when my release was sent, but what's right now. Now, what if I sent a release with, day-old weather on it, and it was because that equipment was out, and now they're trying to call for weather, and they're in the air, and they can't get it, so they can't land. So that's why we want to make sure, because I'm trying to predict what problems I can solve before they even start. Okay, so types of weather charts, things, you'll spend a lot of time looking at different weather models when you're in the weather portion. You'll spend a lot of time, more time in Graham School, things like that, once you're working for an airline. Everybody has their favorite token tools that they use, but you'll always have the approved tools that you can use by your airline that are in your op specs. So you're going to have these reported observations. So METARs, that's what's happening right now. PIREPs, that's pilot experiences of where turbulence is, or whatever that they're going to report up there. Any radar summaries, surface analysis, weather depictions, constant pressure charts. And like I say, during the weather week, we will go through all of these things so that you can get an idea. You're going to give the forecast. So what's happening now versus what's happening in the future. Forecast, we're going to have our TAF. So that's our main forecast. You've got prog charts, AirMets, SIGMETs, all of these convective SIGMETs. So that's me looking and seeing if the government has said, hey, convective SIGMETs for thunderstorms, right? That's convective activity. And they're going to put, an area on the map that for whatever reason, they're predicting a high probability that something's going to happen, and they will let those go. And sure enough, usually something pops up in there. Not always, but commonly. So all of that types of things. So yeah, if I'm sending a plane, across Oklahoma in July, I am going to, and I see one of these SIGMETs or convective SIGMETs pop up, I'm going to make sure that I've remarked on my release that, built route this way based on the SIGMET or whatever it may be. So, or provided hold fuel for the, for the ability to change routes, however it's going to be along there. So, like I say, one of the things in a good practice is, and this is why just getting used to kind of looking around at the weather, we'll talk a lot in Weather Week about like a weather brief. Now it'll feel, I'm going to be honest, it feels like when you're practicing this and you're kind of going through these charts, it feels a little bit cumbersome, like, oh my gosh, I have to spend an hour to figure out the weather every day. Well, you're not going to do that when you get into real life. I pull up my map. I've got all my weather layers on that. I pull up all my other little charts that I have available, and I am going to, I can give a once over in, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I can have a good idea and be like, oh, scary, Detroit looks crazy. And I can look, okay, I got a lot of Detroit flights. That's unfortunate today. I can have an idea of what's going on, watching the Trump or the fronts going on, things like that. So having that snapshot in your mind of what's happening and where movement is will also help you not become so vigilant on one flight. Because like I say, all of the METAR and the TAF, those are legally required, but they don't always tell the whole story. And that's why I use other models as well. So, okay, each certificate holder shall prepare a dispatch release for the flight between specified points based on information furnished by an authorized aircraft dispatcher. So that's you. We are going to create these dispatch releases. They're going to be handwritten when you do your releases and you do your flight plans here. These are a generated form that are going to be organized, and it's going to have all the stuff on it. It's going to have your flight plan. It's going to have your weather. It's going to tell your tail number. It's going to give your crew member information. It's going to tell the payload or estimated payload. It's going to give all of the, performance data that's available for those types of, for everything that's going on today, things like that. So, or for that flight, I shouldn't say today, for that flight. So that's what you spend a lot of your time doing, is generating releases. I remember one of my trainers told me that you generate a release and then you do a lap around the map, is what he called it. And that means I put everything in the system, and then I looked around my desk. Do I have anything flashing at me that needs my attention? And then I would look at my little map, and I show you over here because that's where it was on my desk, or I guess still lives on my desk. And I would go through and I would just kind of touch on every flight and look at their path. Is everything looking good? Is there anything I need to warn them about? And this happens within literally a couple of minutes. This is not a big cumbersome process. It's just check, check, check. Oh, wait, this guy's flying into some turbulence. I better let him know real quick. Send him a little message, cha, 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 going into the turbulence. Here's the deal. And then everybody else is good. Then I'm going to go back and do a release. And then I kind of do that process over and over and over again. So both the PIC and the dispatcher will sign the release only if you both believe the flight can be made safely. So I sign the release based on me putting it in the system functionally. That means I generated that, so I probably shouldn't have put it in the system if I didn't think it was safe. And that's what is my digital signature. They will read the release and then sign it that they also agree. So and it is all digital now in the real world, which is kind of cool. Now, the aircraft dispatcher may delegate authority to sign a release for a particular flight, but may not delegate his authority to dispatch. Okay. So basically this comes down to, I can't pass the buck. I can pass down flights. I can hand a flight that I was working on that maybe I didn't even finish, and I can delegate that over to someone else. And that's going to be their operational control now. I can work up my flights and, oh my gosh, 10 of my planes were delayed today and it's just a mess and I'm never going to get out of here. No, I get to go home at my duty time, but I'm going to pass down my flights to the next dispatcher. We're going to have a conversation. I'm going to let them know everything they need to know. They're going to check all my releases. They're going to check everything that's going on and say, yes, I accept this pass down. They're going to sign it off. And now those are their flights and they're in operational control. Okay. So, and it does get sticky, like you're not obligated to take a junk pass down. It's not uncommon that, you look at the pass down and I'm like, you send a message back. Hey, by the way, you don't have a legal alternate on there. Can you go ahead and fix that, please? I don't want to necessarily, if not, and that's fine if I just accept it, but now it's on me and I better real quickly change that alternate if that's the case. So it is okay to do those types of things. But if anything happens and your name is on that and you are still in operational control of that flight, you don't get to kind of shirk that responsibility. Or like I say, it wasn't me, it was somebody else's fault. If somebody gave me a junk pass down and I signed it off, I can't say, well, there wouldn't have been an incident if he would have been a better dispatcher. Yeah, he probably should have been a better dispatcher, but I also accepted to take that on, and I assumed it as a legal flight. So those are kind of those things. We have to, keep that process in mind. I can't also just chuck my flights over to somebody else, turn off my computer, and bing, I'm out. I've got to make sure they've acknowledged it and they have reviewed and they have gone through the process and they are comfortable with my flights. I know as a dispatcher, that was probably my bigger fear. I never lived dangerously on picking alternates and things like that on my flights later in the day. Anything that was going to be passed down, that was my worst fear, giving a complete garbage pass down to someone. And please rest assured, there are going to be days that you did a really beautiful, a great release with a great plan. And all good plans still sometimes fall down the toilet, and you're going to give a garbage pass down, not intentionally or because you were a knucklehead, but because it's just an ugly day. But for the most part, I try very, very hard to, make sure that they are good. And I review them myself before I just send them on their way to make sure, did anything change that I didn't catch in the last hour? So kind of an important thing there. Okay, so the dispatch release must contain a minimum of, for each flight, the identification number of the aircraft. That's the tail number. The trip number is going to be typically like a marketing flight number. So this is Delta flight 4062. So that's going to be your trip number. The departure airport, intermediate airport, destination airport, alternate airports, all airports served during that you're going to utilize for that. So if I'm going to Denver to Salt Lake and my alternate is St. George, I'm going to make sure I have all of those listed on there and all of the information associated with all three of those, the weather, the everything that we're going to do with that. But we've got to have that list of airports on there. We need a statement of the type of operation, IFR or VFR, and the minimum fuel supply. So what fuel supply do they need when they take off? Okay, so the minimum fuel supply. So there's different ways to remember this. The acronym, I think almost everyone does in this class. I'm going to be honest, it's damn it. And it does not work in my brain. And so I have to really think about it. But I think it's the departure airports, and that goes for all the airports, a statement of operation, the IFR, VFR, minimum fuel supply, identification of aircraft, and then trip number. So if that helps you remember these things, because Ann, you're going to get this in a question. The way I do it that remembers, that works in my brain. So if this happens, if your brain is wired similar to mine, Godspeed on that one. But what I would say I remembered was trip type tail, airports, fuel. And I just kind of dumbed it down a little bit because I go trip tail type, airports, fuel. So however that is easy for you to remember, go ahead and do that. Okay, and you must have contained in the dispatch release or attached to it all the weather reports for all those airports you just listed, the forecasts, the METARs, all of that information, and it's got to be all of the latest weather. So again, we talked about this already. I can't send weather from 3 hours ago. I've got to send current weather. So I must have that weather connected to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take another break. Let's come back at 45, or do we need a little bit longer to get any more snacks or anything? 45 okay? Give me some thumbs up or thumbs down, or okay, 45 it is. We'll see you in a minute. Okay, did we get everybody back? Made it halfway. Let's keep going. Questions so far? Did everybody at least get up and stretch? Brian?
Yeah, the everything that's required for a dispatch release. So you said trip number is like the flight number.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing obviously there's a date that's on the dispatch release as well, right? I'm just thinking from a record keeping standpoint, how do you
Yeah, there's
differentiate?
going to be a date, and again, remember, there's way more information on a release that that we can that's going to be on there. And every company, the way they kind of lay them out is slightly different, and all of those things. But this is like that's the required minimum.
Okay, got it.
So
no
pipe tail.
plan is required. I mean, I know departure, airport, destination, and alternates, but no actual routing is required. Is it
No what?
actual routing?
No, the flight plan that's going to be another thing, right? So this
Okay.
is minimum, and
Totally separate.
extra things can be attached to it. So, but yes, like on the dispatch releases that I send, we combine it all into one big old document, and it's going to have all the takeoff and landing data, and it's going to have all of the, the trip type tail, the airport served, the minimum fuel supply. It's going to have the weather reports. It's going to have all of those things kind of integrated. It's going to have the flight plan. It's going to be filed with ATC. It's going to have all of those things. Type of, we're doing in this class, we're doing IFR flight plans. And, so these are, again, this is the minimum of that, what has to be on that. And then you'll add to it to make it a functional flight plan. So, or, I guess you think back to a world where I didn't do this, where it was all on paper that, you had minimums, and they actually had, copies of actual paper, stuff used to get sent to stations and things like that. So, okay. Yeah. Joseph.
Yeah, so I was just wondering on like the IFR versus VFR, if like the commercial flights are ever VFR, or those pretty much always IFR?
We run IFR flight plans. However, we will follow visual rules on occasion when needed. So
Okay.
depending on different airports, depending on different MELs, there's a lot of it depends on there. So, but yeah, we may have to, if we don't have certain navigational equipment, we may need to do those rules. But it
Okay.
does have to be notated on there. So for instance, we do fly, and this isn't on a 121 rule, but we do fly on another rule that to one weird little airport that we actually have to mark on there that they transition from VFR to IFR when they take off, and they transition from IFR to VFR when they're landing. So you don't see that on the 121 as much, but we're flying into more established places that have, actual airports and, actual equipment and people and better fuel farms and all the different things. So not just the Wild West out there in some of these rinky-dink little places. So, okay, we get those answered. So trip type tail, all the airports, statement of operation, which is that type, and then minimum fuel that you're going to need. Okay, wait, let me go back to share the screen. Oh, wait, am I still sharing? I sure am. So let me go back in there so I can flip the slide. Look at that. So it's just probably better that way. Okay, the load manifest. Okay, so we're going to have, this is going to be more information connected to the release, right? It's going to be all of the information of what's in that airplane. Okay. So it's going to have the load, where stuff is loaded. It's going to tell me all the cargo, all of the souls on board. So the passengers, the baggage, the fuel, the weight. It's going to give us all of this information so that we can actually get proper numbers and that we know we're in weight and balance and we know what we're carrying. So it's going to give us all of that information, as well as with that information, then we're going to do the math, and we're going to make sure that we have our center of gravity is within approved limits. You'll hear that called within an envelope. Oftentimes it can be plotted on a little graph. We're actually going to graph this in class. The bonus is on the day-to-day, I don't have to graph anything. So, but we do need to make sure that we're not exceeding any of the structural limits of the aircraft by being too heavy. And we want to make sure that we are within that center of gravity. So, and everybody understands that, right? You know, everything's got a specific center of gravity. I've got my little popcorn bag thing here, you know, I can find a place which, you know, that it's going to balance, right? And that's where we're looking, is where is that center balance point that it's going. Our CRJ 700 I mentioned last night is nose heavy. So it runs a little heavy in the nose. We converted, for SkyWest, we converted some of the CRJ 700. So it's the same airframe, same everything, but we took out some of the seats and we readjusted. We put, like, you know, more first class seats and made a little, you know, different configuration, but we put an interesting group of bins in the middle that the carry-on luggage could go on, so there was more space. And it's interesting because the way we adjusted the seats, and we took this towards the front, this big chunk of seats out, there's like a little snack, I don't know, I call it the snack shack, but it's like a serve yourself. You can go up and get your potato chips or whatever. Right there in the kind of in the forward of center, but you know, from the center to forward of center, and it adjusted the center of gravity of these aircraft. So the center, these are now a little more tail heavy. So it's really unique on this one, is even though it's the same type of, you know, the shell is the same, the airframe's the same. So center of gravity is a big thing. So that's when we were saying yesterday, we have to be, you know, appropriate weight as well as balance. So we've got to be in the weight limitations of the aircraft. And then we've also got to have it balanced, because again, planes need to be in that balance to take flight. Okay, we're going to keep all of these different releases that is required for the certificate holder. So the airline to keep those for 3 months. And those are available. Your releases will be in real life. They will be audited. Okay, there are their name. Sometimes we just, you know, chase down because we need to find information. Sometimes we have to, you know, we're just doing a general audit to see how you're doing. You're going to be audited much more frequently when you first get to a job and you're out on your own. Again, a lot of it's to give feedback, right? It's not to, ooh, let's go find a, you know, let's go get a gotcha. It's, you know, what feedback can we give you to, you know, your planning looks good on this one. You did miss an alternate, or you did this, whatever. This might be a suggested change you can make. And as you get through time and you're, you know, more solidified on your own, then the audits become, you know, more just checking compliance. And it is, you know, a regulation that we do have to audit a certain percentage of the flights every day, so that we're getting a nice, and it's got to be randomized. So I can't, you know, pick just the good dispatcher or just the bad dispatcher or whatever I want, or somebody in the middle. It's randomized, and so that you get a good sampling and you have an idea of the majority. You know, we're using the law of large numbers by doing that. So we will track those down within those 3 months. So, okay, dispatcher duty time. We can only be scheduled for 10 consecutive hours. Now, you may remain on duty until your airplanes have completed its flight or gone beyond the jurisdiction or relieved by another dispatcher. You can never just tap out. You can't be like, oh, look at those planes in the air. They're pretty. I'm going to go. You have to either have to pass them down. It is legal for you to stay on. You can work more than that 10 hours in a 24-hour period, but you must have 8 hours of rest before your next 10-hour duty day. So, and you must be relieved of duty for 24 hours any 7 consecutive days or the equivalent thereof in a month. Does that make sense to anybody? So, breaking it down, okay, I can only be scheduled for 10 hours. I can work a little bit longer, but I have to get 8 hours rest. So if I just keep working and working and working, and I'm supposed to work at 2 in the morning, you know, I gotta call it off at some point because I'm out of duty time. And then, or my schedule will have to be adjusted. The time off is you either need at least 1 day off a week or the equivalent per month. So that's 4 days off every 28 days. About 4 days off a month functionally. So that means functionally, if you would like, you can work 28 days straight, and then you take your 4 days off, and then you can start again, kind of start the clock over again. So I'm just here to tell you that's a lot of days to work straight, and your brain will be straight up fried, but it is a possibility. There's been a couple of dispatchers that, you know, they were picking up a bunch of overtime and whatever, and they stacked them against each other. So it ended up being like 40, whatever that works out, you know, what that's a little bit more than that. 40, 56 days straight, because they put them on either side and of the 4 days off here and 4 days off there, and then worked in between. So it just has to be in that month. Like I say, I do guarantee your brain will fry before you do that very frequently. So what we have to watch on duty time typically is that I can't work until 10 o'clock tonight and then pick up a 4 a.m. shift tomorrow morning if I don't have that 8 hours of rest. So that's usually what precludes it, is what am I working versus what can I pick up? And I will kind of do just a little quick spiel on this, because it seems like it comes up somewhere along the line that people start freaking out when we, you know, talking about working at 2 a.m.s and stuff like that. You will find the shift that somehow works for you and whatever your life is, whatever that is. I don't think anybody chooses to work at 2 in the morning, but I like the workload at 2 in the morning, the way we run it for our airline. It is suitable to me. I really dislike dispatching in summers, in the afternoons in the summer. So I'd rather work in the mornings in the winter than have summers in the afternoon. I also bid based on days off was my thing. And so I just always ended up on 2 a.m.s. I did on a couple of occasions, I would pick up a shift. So I worked the morning, like, you know, today, and then pretend I worked the afternoon. So I work like a 3 or 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. So I'm not able to work the next day night, but I can either take a day off or I can start inching my times back up if I trade. I did do that where I did flip-flop circadian rhythm things. It does mess with you, just so you know. So buyer beware, do it for your friends, but it does kind of jack you up. And there is, in fact, an actual, you know, syndrome that comes for hospital workers, emergency workers, and aviation workers with this circadian rhythm. It gets a little weird for your system, but it's taken me, it's been, since September, October, November, December, like 4 months or so that I don't wake up frantic at about, 2:15 thinking I'm missing work. So I finally don't do that anymore. So it does kind of change you a little bit there. But those are your duty time requirements. Okay, each certificate holder shall provide enough qualified aircraft dispatchers at each dispatch center to ensure proper operation control of flights. What do you think that number would be? What seems, like that would make sense? Any ideas? Somebody pop on. What would be adequate qualified aircraft dispatchers? Here's somebody getting on there.
I'll just say it depends, but whatever your operational tempo is and however many aircraft you have that you're operating, figure out how many you think you need, and then add about 50% for vacations, people getting sick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay, well, no, let's hear some ideas. What would be some other ideas that you guys have?
I've heard like the major, like Delta may have something like 300 or 400 employed dispatchers.
Yep. They actually, I think they have more than that.
Really? Yeah.
I have to ask Jaden and Allison, but I think they have a very, very large number. In fact, yeah, I'm pretty sure they have more than 300 or 400. I think they're probably upwards of 5. But
Wow.
estimating it's huge. But what makes that number the magic number? Anybody have any ideas? What type of things do you think, other things you think airlines consider when they do this?
How many flights they have planned?
Okay.
Flight load.
How many flights they have? Any other ideas that they would consider?
Where they're flying, they may need
Inside
24/7.
destination with the
Two person,
weather.
hang on,
Go
I got
ahead,
a couple
Mohammed.
people talking. So the first one said where they're flying. Okay. Did you have something else to add? Oh, we
Me?
have three people talking. Now we have none.
So I said plane type, destination. How the
Okay.
weather might be over there, and
Okay.
maybe connections and how long they're gonna have to wait if they do. If there's a holdover or not.
Wait, what do you mean by connections based on number of dispatchers? Connect those dots for me.
Based on dispatchers. The amount of dispatchers, no, I don't think it should matter actually. But
That's what I was asking. It's like, how do we decide how many dispatchers is enough? It's kind of arbitrary, right? So, Trevor.
Just like the workload for each dispatcher, like how many flights you can handle at one time, too.
Yeah. So all of these things are good ideas. So here's the trick this is one of the things that the FAA says you need to provide enough qualified aircraft dispatchers at each center to ensure proper operational control. So with that being said, there isn't a magic formula. There's not a specific, if you have 1,000 flights, you need 100, dispatchers, whatever it is. There's not a specific guideline. Kind of comes down to safety of flight. So each airline gets to describe what that is for them. Now the trick is they do have to make sure, the FAA is going to oversee this and say, okay, that tracks, that matters, but they all run into it differently. Some of the bigger airlines may have unions that also kind of advocate for dispatchers and say, well, the dispatcher's maximum flight load should be 30 flights a day or 35 flights a day or whatever it is. Like I say, at SkyWest, our target is 47 flights a day. It's not always perfect. Sometimes you got a few less, sometimes you got a few more. Things go like that. Sorry, we got people coming in. And then, like I say, our morning flight desks are a little bit heavier. Our afternoon ones are a little lighter. That's kind of a general target. There's a particular European budget airline ranch. They're not under the FAA, so please, they don't fly over here, so it's a little different on their rules. But they run an obscene number of flights on each dispatcher's desk. However, they have a ton of automation. So a lot of the workload, and that becomes kind of one of the interesting conversations. And I've actually asked the question because, like AI is becoming a big thing. And I think what it boils down to with dispatchers, there are unions with the dispatchers that are going and trying to protect jobs and making sure that AI doesn't take this over. Now, the way I feel like AI, I think the next 5 years in dispatch is going to be completely wild to watch as this AI rolls out and these tools. And, like I say, there's software programs where you have to build your routes point by point by point. There's software programs now that I can put a point A and a point B and I can circle where I don't want it to go, and it'll optimize a route around any bad weather and optimize it to the wind. Well, that's kind of cool. So there's all these things that will reduce my planning workload. And then again, this will be a discussion with the FAA as these things roll out, as we would like to give our dispatchers more flights per desk, or maybe it's like, no, we're going to make them more centered on the flight following and, support in the air and things like that. So it's kind of interesting because this is one of the rules that probably has the most latitude, because like I say, you have to have it adequate, but we're not going to tell you what that is. And that is very different, So there are days I'll tell you that, I could probably do 60 flights on a desk and not even, blink an eye. And there's days that I'm going to tell you 40 flights feels like too much. So it does depend day to day. But each airline gets to make this decision. Now, if they decided that 10 dispatchers per shift is plenty and they were having all kinds of problems and they were having issues and lots of ASAPs and heavy things for workload, then, inspectors might step in and say, gosh, maybe you need 14, whatever that number is. So just kind of an interesting thing. So if you're going to fly into another country, each certificate holder, remember when I say a certificate holder, that's going to be the airline, the companies that's launching these flights. Each certificate holder, while operating an airplane within a foreign country, will comply with the air traffic rules of the country concerned and the local airport rules, except where any rule of this part is more restrictive and may be followed without violating the rules of that country. So what this means is you're going to follow whatever rules are most restrictive. So if I'm flying from here to Canada to some weird airport, I am going to, if the US rules are more restrictive, I'm going to fly those the whole way. If the Canadian rules are more restrictive in this situation, I'm going to follow the Canadian rules. Whatever one is the most restrictive, but I have to comply with the minimum rules in that country if I'm going to fly there. Does that make sense? Because like I say, if let's say the US rules are more restrictive, then I'm always going to make their rules. Okay. Oh, somebody's hand popped up. Was that Peter? It popped up and went quick.
It was. I just hit the wrong button. So
Oh,
sorry. I was just going to give you a thumbs up.
heck yeah. Okay. So like I say, we're going with what's more restrictive. What I can't do is be like, well, I like the Canadian rules better. They're a little easier. I'll follow those instead. What I want is whatever is most restrictive. In all of my planning, you'll hear that statement over and over and over and over again. I will plan what is more restrictive because I'd rather get surprised and have it be better than I planned versus I planned the perfect situation. It's always 10 and clear and beautiful and everything's wonderful and there's no wind. And then I'm constantly kicking people off flights because at the last minute because I didn't plan that way. So always look at what is more restrictive, but that's in foreign countries. Okay, we must maintain two-way communication system or other means of communication approved by the FAA. And it's got to be available the entire route of that flight. Okay, these can be direct links. They can be different types. Does anybody know any of these types of communication things you might have heard of? We've even mentioned a few over the last couple of nights. Anybody want to put out an idea? No ideas? Okay, so we're going to have like ACARS. Okay, so that's going to be our aircraft communication and reporting system. So this is it's going to log all the stuff of the airplane, what's happening. It's going to tell me my OOE times, we call them, when we get, out, off, on, in. That's, so out of the gate, up in the air, back on the ground, back into the gate. Those are our OOE times. It's going to tell me when the engines are rolling. It's going to tell me when the doors have closed. It's going to tell me when they put the brakes on, all these things. But it's also my little text messaging system. It does all these things. So I'm going to be able to text message a pilot. No problem. I'm going to send him a little message and say, hey, how's the rides? I'm going to send him a message. Hey, turbulence coming 20 minutes ahead at your flight level. Burn, if, I'm hearing, instead of 340, let's go down to 300. I'm hearing you got good rides there. Here's your burn. Those are little text message. They can ask me questions. Hey, what's going on with this? Is there any holding? How is the visibility looking and in Chicago? We're about 20 minutes out. What are you seeing? They can ask us back. So we can go back and forth. We need those types of things. We also can call them during like a phone call type radio system. So we use a couple. You'll hear some that's either called Atlanta or Delta Radio. That's because those crazy Delta people, they've got it. But we use Delta Radio a lot of times. And so it's kind of like using a radio, but I use it through my phone. But, you have to push a key to talk, a key to listen, and you use it more like a radio you would, just like the button where you're talking and you're going to lift off. We're using soft keys on our phone. We also use one called AirInc. So that one it's used, it's run through an operator the same way, but it's a little more like a phone call. It doesn't, you don't have to use those kind of radio commands, things like that. There's all these different things. So I might have, certain MELs, so broken things on my aircraft that might say, hey, you need to ensure your entire route has Delta radio or some sort of other communication facility, availability. So I'll check, like if I'm going to Mexico, well, gosh, this is not a great aircraft to go that because I will lose communication during this time. So, that all comes back to this FAR, that we need a way to get available and be in contact with them this entire time. So, except in an emergency, the communications between airplane and dispatch office must be independent of any system operated by the United States. So we want backups. So backups to the backups. We love backups and backups. What do you think you would do if you can't get a hold of an aircraft? Brian.
Would you contact ATC and see if they could?
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Contact ATC, see if they can get a hold of them. Whatever other things.
If you have other planes up, you can just try to get a pilot relay.
Say that again.
You could try to get a pilot relay from other aircraft that are up in the vicinity.
Yeah, okay. Look, I see another SkyWest flight about to follow you. Hey, can you get on company and trying to get a hold of this guy? That'd be another thing. Okay.
I don't know if it's too extreme, but you could maybe declare an emergency.
So you could declare an emergency. That would be a possibility. We're going to talk more about when you would maybe do that. So, any other ideas? Ideas? Okay, what if you can't get a hold of an aircraft? Any ideas? Hey, how are the rides? And nobody responds back to me. Kind of like in this moment in this class. Good. Brett.
Could you maybe try troubleshooting your equipment?
Okay. That would be one of the things I first check is, is there a chance their ACARS is out, things like that. So I might, troubleshoot that. What else? Rebecca.
Can you ask ATC to try to have them squawk?
I could ask ATC squawk. Am I going to do that every time if I ask for ride reports and they don't talk to me? I mean, I could. Brian.
I guess maybe just take a look at them on the map and make sure everything's, make sure they're on the route and, everything seems to be normal.
Okay. So that becomes the question in discernment is, do I have reason to believe something's gone sideways? Now, if they were supposed to land in Denver and they've already passed and are over in Kansas, I'm concerned. There's an issue there, right? But when it comes down to if, I happen to reach out to them, hey, what's going on? How's the flight? How's the rides? Or, here's some turbulence out there, just let you know. And I kind of get the radio silence, but they're right on track for what they need to be. They're right on for timing. They're at the proper flight altitude. Everything seems to be going. And I just watch them and they're seem to be getting into pattern to get ready to land, whatever it is. I'm not going to probably freak out if there's nothing that I'm needing. If there is some sort of emergency, I'm going to use some of these additional methods. So I may not just send them in ACARS. I may try and get them on Delta radio or something like that. I may have them get squawked. I might have other things. But like I say, if I'm asking for the ride reports and they're not, responding and there's nothing really going on, I'm not going to stress. So those are the kind of things that you're looking at. So we are going to keep these, any of these contacts, like everything you're going to do at an airline's all recorded. All of our telephone messages are recorded and everything. And it's nice. It's to protect you. It's to protect everyone. But we do have to have all those recording for at least 30 days. So questions about that? And it does bring up dispatchers actually can declare an emergency. I've never have. I'm going to knock on wood because I don't really want to, but it is within our operational control to be able to do that. So, okay. So this is, we're going to kind of, this slide's a little bit messy. So what we're going to do is looking at visibility being controlling for when we're dispatching our releases. So let's stop for a minute and we're going to talk about minimums. We're going to do this for a few minutes. So everybody go to your drive. And of course, this is going to probably not switch. I'm going to, so go to the Google Drive. Here, and hang on, I'm going to get in. For those of you who forgot, let me share my screen again. Boop. Okay. Don't freak out. This is minimums looking at 101. In fact, it's pre-101. So let me get back here. Okay, so here's your Google Drive, right? Okay, so if everybody's there, go ahead and click into flight planning. Okay, and I want you to pick this Jeppeson's charts. Give it a little check, okay? These are the charts. So this is functionally our C70 list from our op specs for Aircraft Dispatch Academy. These are the airports that we are authorized to go to. So, okay. So we're going to go ahead. Does anybody have an airport they like or dislike? Why don't we look at Denver? Denver's funds. Okay. So basic Jeppesen chart. Is this showing? Okay, good. Okay, Jeppesen charts. So Jep charts, you'll hear this. These are going to be the official charts that we're going to use for this. Okay. It's going to give all kinds of information on this first page here. Okay. You got a little aerial view of what that airport looks like. A lot of runways, a lot of space out there. It's really like just, you know, the square miles that it's on there is it's a big area. Okay, we are going to go through. It's going to have basic information, like say we've got the airport elevation on here. You're going to have all these little things. And again, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole too far because you're going to get a whole thing on this. Okay, but you're going to have, you know, basic stuff here on, you know, the airports, how they're laid out. Like I say, you see this 12,000 feet right here. That's how long that runway is. I've got a lot of 12,000 foot runways here in Denver. Now, if Lindsay designed this airport 16,000 foot, I mean, that's great. We've got some good stuff. Lindsay would have added 2 more east-west runways, but they didn't ask Lindsay. Oh, Denver. They should have asked somebody, but no, they got a lot of space. They've got a lot of options, things like that, but it's going to give you an idea of where everything is, where the de-icing pads are, where the, you know, the facilities are, things like that. So you can kind of navigate around a little bit there. Okay. We've got this general chart, again, Reader's Digest version. We're going to talk a little bit about this when we start to talk about like alternates and things like that, as well as takeoff minimums. And then you're going to have all of these different things, these arrivals and these departures. Now for tonight, we're going to scroll past these arrivals. So the arrivals means this is the little track I'm going to take to get in if I file the Rams 8 arrival. Okay, I've got the Thompson, I've got arrivals, you know, lander, la, la, la. We're going to scroll past these. I want you to go cruising down and we're going to get into our approach plate. So not the route to get there, What are we going to do when we actually land? Okay. So here we've got up here in the top, you're going to see the ILS, Instrument Landing System or Localizer to Runway 7. Okay. So this is the Instrument Landing System or Localizer to Runway 7. It's going to give me some basic information. It's going to give me, you know, the frequency of that localizer, the name, the IDZG, that localizer. It's going to give my minimum safe altitudes. And like I said, don't worry about any of this stuff, and don't even freak out because it looks like you're reading some other language. Just like a little kind of once over here. But we are going to zoom in right here. And we're going to have some minimums. Okay, so when I'm launching to fly to Denver, okay, I've always got to have those minimums or what I'm going to look at to say if I'm legal to go. I'm legal based on visibility. So I'm always going to look at the visibility. Okay, so if everything is working on this particular chart, so we're on runway 7, we are a category C airplane right here, down here where you see A, B, C, D. Do you see where my little cursor is moving? If anybody does not, let me know. A, B, C, D, CRJ7 is a category C aircraft. Okay. If everything is working, I need 1/2 statute mile of visibility. And I need, in this parentheses up here, I need a 200-foot ceiling. As long as I have that 1/2 statute mile visibility, that's what I'm determining my legal to go on. But I have to have my weather that is going to show that it's going to be a 1/2 statute miles. This is for a category 1 chart. That's all we're going to do in this class, category 1. We're not going to get crazy on anything else. This RVR right here, you're going to add 2 zeros under here. Runway visual range. So a 1/2 statute mile of visibility means I can see a 1/2 statute mile in front of me. That's what is reporting. Weather is always going to report in those statute miles. But they have some equipment that will actually tell us what the actual runway visual range is. And that's the same equivalent, 1800 runway visual range or RVRs, or a 1/2 statute mile. The weather, like I say, will typically report in statute miles. Some of the big airports, like LAX does it a lot, they will report RVRs for a specific runway. You will have programs and have access to, and in weather, we'll show you even some places you can go find those. RVRs are always controlling. So let's say I've got, 4,000 RVR, but I only have a 1/4 statute mile. Does anybody want to take a guess on if when I say things are controlling, if that means I'm legal or not? I need a 1/2 statute mile or 1800 RVR. My weather is reporting 1/4 statute mile, but my RVRs are reporting 4,000. Oh, I lost the thing. Somebody's got a hand up. I got to pull my thing back up. People. Arian.
I think you're legal.
You think I am? Why do you
Yes.
think I am? Because I want you to, you are right, by the way.
Because you needed 1800. So
And I
since
have-
you have 4,000, so you have
Okay.
more.
So if RVRs, you're never going to have to worry about that in our class. We're not going to be reporting RVRs to you because those are literally in the second what's happening. RVRs, however, anytime we say something is controlling, that's the value you have to follow. Now, if it tells me I've got a 1/2 statute mile, but my RVRs are saying 1,200, and that's actually reporting in the weather, I'm not legal because RVR is controlling. Runway visual range is controlling. In my experience, I have a hard time thinking of a time when RVR did not help me. Usually it helps me, doesn't hurt me. It could potentially hurt me, but very typically it's the statute miles are reporting lower, but I'm able to get the RVRs. And that's a common question for a pilot, especially like today, Portland, Eugene, Spokane, all of these things is, it was pretty ugly and messy up there. And that's what you'd see a lot of ACARS messages coming through that what are the current RVRs, when they'd be getting close, you're good. It's 6,000 across the board. Really that's as high as it points. We're good. You're fine. But it's going to predict what they're able to see when they get there. So we are going to look at visibility. Okay, so half statute mile is typically what you're going to look at, 200. Now the lowest minimums you're going to see on an ILS are 200.5. So 200-foot ceiling, half statute mile of visibility. Now, let's say some equipment's out. Let's say I'm reading, okay, I'm going to go on this runway. I'm going to go through this process. Okay, I'm good. I've read my weather. I am legal. I've got a half and 200. So that's fine. And then I'm going to read through and ooga lolly, the ALS, the airport lighting system is out. Snap. I hate when that happens. So now I have a 200-foot ceiling. Okay, I'm looking at that number right there. And now I have to have a minimum of 3/4 statute miles. Okay, so if my weather is reporting 200.5, so I'm right at minimums and everything, and then I find my ALS is out, I'm not legal anymore, right? Because I need 3/4 statute miles. Does that make sense? Any yeses, any nos, any questions? Okay. Now the bonus of a hub is even if the ALS is out on runway number 7, I'm going to probably be able to scroll down here and see, oh, look, there's 34 right. There's 35 left. There's plenty of choices. Oh, this one's kind of cool. ILS, 35 left. So this one's kind of interesting because it's showing this 1800 with a very kind of a different rule. You're always going to round up on that. So it's saying 3/8, but we can't really have 3/8. So we got to have the half. We're always going to round up. So contractions, remember, cup of milk, half a cup of milk, 1/4 cup of milk. So 3/8 is going to round up to 4/8, which is a half statute mile. So it's reported a little differently. Also has a little thing that says in here, I'm going to have the autopilot if I'm going to be able to use that on certain things like this one. So we'll get into that. So different minimums coming down along the way. A lot of 3/8 on Denver. It's a little funky like that. So kind of unique, but most of these are going to say that 200.5. Some of the approaches are a little bit, let's see which ones. This one. My computer's trying to freeze. So this is ILS or localized runway 8. Okay, so we're going to come back and play with this in a minute. Let's take another 15-minute break, come back at 45. We'll see you shortly, and we'll kind of go back to where we're going with this. Da, 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 da. That was my alarm bell. We're back. Okay, everybody have a lovely break because we're going to go on the home stretch. Very good. Okay, so that was the once over. So I'm going to do a little testy test here. I'm sharing. I am. Okay, so we are going to go here to, let me find a good one. Oh, not a good one. We're still going to do a basic one here. Let's look at PDX, which is Portland, Oregon. Big whopping airport elevation of 31 feet. They're getting crazy over there. So is it still sharing? Okay. So, and if you're following along in your drive and it's easier for you to look there, we're going to scroll down and we're going to find us a nice little approach plate. There's a lot of information with the terrain and the stuff in Portland. Okay. So we are going to actually look at, oh yeah, okay, this is a fun one to show. So hold on. So we are, just to show you where I am. So if anybody's following along, you can either watch on my screen here, we're looking, or if you're looking in your own drive, ILS to localizer 1, runway 10 left, 10 left. Okay, so it's going to show me what the plane's going to do and all the rules right there. It's going to give me all my information. That's to be soon deciphered. And then let me just zoom us in here a little bit. Okay, straight in, landing, runway 10 left. Okay. What is my visibility that I need if everything's working? Somebody raise your hand. Sam.
That'd be half mile.
Half mile or 2400 RVR. Okay, so half mile, 2400 RVR. Now I've got a little tricky question. Do you remember where I find that ceiling requirement? Who knows what my ceiling is on this? Brian.
263 feet.
Yeah, but just for you know, clouds are not reported in exact numbers like that, so we're always going to round up to the nearest 100. So in that case, this ceiling requirement would be what?
2,700. Hey, 270.
The
Sorry.
nearest 100.
300. Sorry, it's getting late.
Yeah, right. Okay, Riley, were you going to say 300? Okay, 300. So we're always on that ceiling, going to round up. So 300. Now a little different because a typical ILS is 200.5. However, on this one, it's going to be 300.5. Now, Brian?
Is the 293 there? Is that like above sea level?
So this is the decision altitude.
Okay.
That's your decision, the altitude at which they've got to make a decision to go.
Oh, 293 is, oh, I see. Okay.
And then 263 is our ceiling requirement.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
300. So we have to have at least 300 feet to actually land. Now, let's say they've only got, the weather is reporting 200.5. If I can dispatch based on visibility, am I legal to launch? If the weather's actually reporting 200.5. Arian.
No,
If I'm doing it based on visibility.
you can either do a visibility or ceiling. Both
Okay.
of them. One of them has. If one of them is illegal, then you cannot conduct the flight. So it doesn't have to be both. Am I right?
To land, you need both. To land, you need both. However, we're going to launch based on visibility.
If it's based on visibility and it's 250,
No, what's the 250?
250, are you talking about the ceiling or
Visibility. Which number is visibility?
250? Oh,
1/2 statute mile is the visibility.
correct.
Okay, so if the weather is reporting 200.5 statute mile, I need a 1/2 statute mile visibility. I don't have the ceiling, which means it's a pretty good chance I'm going to divert if the weather stays looking like that. I better have a good
Correct.
alternate and plan, but I am
Correct.
legal to go
Okay.
because we're basing it on visibility. Now, let's ask the question why. Okay, so clouds move, they change, they wiggle, they do different things like that, right? So the visibility is a little more consistent. So we want to have that strong visibility, and that ceiling gives us the opportunity to at least attempt that flight and see if something changes that's a little more dynamic. Okay, so in order to land though, I'm going to need to be able to meet the ceiling and the RVR. So it's a little bit more challenging, and we're going to leave that up to pilots to decide if they're going to, you know, if they've got the minimums because they see what's really happening, but we will base visibility on that. So 1/2 statute mile there. So that's that visibility. But then, so now let's say it's reporting 200.5 and the ALS is out. What's my minimums now to land if the ALS is out?
Is it 3/4?
Muhammad,
If we're rounding up, then I'm just gonna say a mile.
yeah. So it's on the chart as 7/8, but 7/8 doesn't really get reported. So it's going to be a statute mile. Okay. So I would then no longer be legal to launch, right? Not legal to land, not legal to launch. So we've got to have both the land, however, we can launch on visibility. Now let's jump over one door next door here. Okay, so see up here where I've got the localizer out. Oh, it's not letting me highlight. Let me see, is it showing my cursor right here around? I need like a bigger pointer. Localizer GS glide slope is GS glide slope out. Okay, goodness, that if that part of my equipment is out, I am going to have much higher minimums to start. So if all the lighting systems are working, I'm going to be at 400 feet, correct? And 5/8 or 3/4 statute miles. Okay, so I've got to go up a little bit. And if my light, that ALS is out and my glide slope is out, I'm going to have much higher minimums, right? RVRs have to be a minimum of 6,000. I've got to have 1 1.125 and 400 feet ceiling. Okay, so everything that changes, everything that's out will change your minimums and can be the difference between a legal flight and a non-legal flight. Does everybody, even though these are, I don't expect you to understand these fully, these charts or any of these things, do we have a idea? Does everybody understand what I've explained on this snapshot? Brian?
On the 1 1/8, didn't you say that you don't, I mean, we have to round that if it's an
We can
8?
do, it'll report in 8ths. Oftentimes it'll report in 8ths and things like that. You're going to mostly see quarter, but just like Spokane today was reporting 1/16. It's these three, you know, so 3/4 is fine, 1/2, 3/4, it's like the 7/8. It'll cut anything that can be cut in half in the number. 7/8 cannot, 5/8 cannot. So I guess like, so 1/2, then 1/4, then 1/8, then 1/16. All of those will work. I just had to do fractions in my head. It was hard. But yeah, Spokane was not legal to go for a lot of airlines. There were a lot of diversions out of there, but they were reporting 1/16. It was a little spooky. Okay. Any other questions on this Reader's Digest version? 'Cause don't worry, we're going to still do some more practice over this week. Okay. Pro tip, this number in the parentheses right here, ceiling. Okay. Category C. So like you notice over here, you've got A and B are grouped over here. C and D are grouped down here. Some airports will have a different one for A, D, C, D. Some of them are all together. Do we have the full ILS instrument landing system? Do we have or just do partial, the glide slope or localizer? Glide slope is out. Okay. So then we'll go there. So let's go back to, this one. Okay, I'm going to show this. Oh, dang, it worked. Didn't work last time, but it worked this time. Okay. So this comes back to, in order to dispatch a flight, okay, in instrument flight rules, or over the top, we'll call this, we're flying over the top of clouds, the weather reports or forecasts or a combination thereof indicate that the weather will be at or above authorized minimums. You can use any of the instrument approach plates, any of those procedures at the destination. So Denver has what, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 12 or something like that, different approach plates that are, ground-based navigation. Okay, we're going to reference the minimum section, and for the destination, we're going to use the visibility to be controlling. Now, again, if my ceiling is really sucky, I am going to make sure I have a really good alternate, because there is a high probability of diversion if things don't change. So you are going to use the TAF in this class to determine that visibility, so that forecast. Now for the destination, the reason we're using the forecast in this class is because we're flying into the future. We could be flying for 2 hours and the forecast is going to tell us what weather is happening in the future. So that's what we're going to use that. Now your airline that you end up may have different rules and say things like, if the flight's under an hour, you've got to use both, or if it's over this line, you have to do this or whatever. But that's what in this class we're going to use the TAF. But the weather reports or forecasts must, get the combination thereof is what you're looking at, and that's what the rule is. So, and when we come to, we can use to derive minimums. You'll hear us say that, derive minimums. You can use any approach plate that is available. Now, I can't use one to a closed runway. I can't use one that the approach is not available because it's broken, whatever reason. But I can go through and look, and I'm always going to look for my lowest possible minimums. And that's what's going to make me legal to go. Okay, so we got a couple of examples that are in here. Okay, so this is Reno. Okay, so Reno has some high minimums. Palm Springs, there's a bunch of these little funny airports that have really high minimums. Reno's the funny little airport, but fortunately has decent weather, just a lot of wind that's hard to fight. Palm Springs, another one that's got really crazy high minimums, but it's kind of clear like 350 days a year, something like that. Now the days it's bad, it's really bad, but it's great place for flying. But here we go. So let's go in. Let's see, can I zoom this in a little bit? Can everybody see this? Not zooming very well because I'm in a different site. Is everybody able to see that? Okay, so let's focus in. Okay, what's my ceiling requirement? Alan.
1100.
1100. Does everybody see that? Okay, what's my visibility requirement? I'm pointing and showing. Arian.
4 statute mile.
4 statute mile. Does anybody disagree? Now, on the ILS to runway 16 right in Reno, notice that this is kind of it. There's no little variations. Now, if the glide slope's out, you're toast. There's no approach for you. This means if that equipment was out, this is no go. You can't even consider it, even if it's the lowest minimums at the airport. Okay. So now let's come up to here. Okay. So you're always going to consider a few things. So K, RNO. So Reno is RNO. K is the ICAO identifier before it. So in the continental US, we're going to be all Ks. Different identifiers in Canada, in like Alaska, the South Pacific, Mexico, and things like that. But for this class, all you'll have to remember is the K part. So K, RNO, we are going to have an estimated time of arrival, ETA, at 1200 Z. Does everybody get Zulu time or Z time? Does anybody would like a little quick explanation on that? And feel free to raise your hand because there may be one. Everybody's good. Oh, Nichelle, question on Z time? Okay, so we are going to use Zulu time. Z time, you'll hear it, Zulu time. This is mean Greenwich time. It is a single time in space that all of aviation uses. It never has spring forward or fall back or anything like this. And it gives us a single reference point that we don't have to calculate time zones and crossing the date line and all of the weird things that happen when we're traversing a circular globe that has different time zones. So we're going to run everything on Z time. If you ever want to see, there's, you know, you can do like mountain to Z time converters, things like that. If you put it on your phone, you add another, you know, I'm one of those that have all the places I like to travel on my phone, like their time zones. You can put in UTC. That will give you the Zulu time for where you are in your time zone. But this is our reference point. And so everything's going to be reported in Z time. It makes it a lot easier to build flights. I'm not having to say, okay, this is 3 hours. This means it's going to cross 2 time zones. And so now it's going to be landing at this time or whatever. Like, have any of you done flights that you cross the international date line coming home? It's a little, or either they're going over, it's, you know, like going east or west over it. It doesn't feel so weird because you're losing a day, but it's kind of bizarre. But coming back, like I leave Fiji at like 9 o'clock at night and I get here at like, you know, 1 in the afternoon earlier, you know, so it's kind of bizarre. So we don't have any of that when we're dealing with Zulu time. So we don't have to worry about anything that way. So that's what that is. So you'll always see Z or Zulu. Okay, so kind of looking through this. So this is TAF 101, and please don't get hung up on any of this, okay? So in Reno, our estimated time of arrival, or ETA, 12Z. You know, this is going to tell me my TAF, okay? This one, you're going to look and have some basic information here. We're going to have some identifiers of like when this was, you know, given. So this was given on the 11th day at 23:20 Zulu is when it was issued. Okay. And don't worry, by the way, because I'm going to give this quid pro quo right now. This usually intimidates people. You're going to be so good at reading these by the end of this class, you don't have to stress this, but we're giving you the Reader's Digest version. Okay, so from the 12th day at 00 Zulu until the 12th day at 24 Zulu, I'm going to have variable winds at 3 knots. 03 knots is KT. So it's a nice day in Reno for winds, but I only have 3 statute miles of visibility, and I am broken at 3, add 2 zeros, 3,000 feet is my ceiling. I'm always, remember earlier I said ceiling is defined by the lowest level of overcast or broken. Overcast and broken is what your eyeball's looking for. BKN, yep, that's me, 3,000 feet. Now, am I legal based on my ceiling? Let's just look at this ceiling, broken 3,000. What's my ceiling requirement? Caitlin.
Yeah, you should be legal because the ceiling's 1100.
Okay, ceiling's 1100 and I've got 3000. However, my visibility, which is what I'm dispatching on, is 3 statute miles. So am I legal? I'm seeing some head shakes. Caitlin again?
No.
No, because I need 4 statute miles. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to have to wait until this weather is reporting, but this is telling me all day. If this is my only approach at that airport, this says all day that I'm going to be at 3 statute miles is what this forecast is. So I've got to wait for an updated one to come out to say, ooh, it's finally better. It's 5 statute miles. Brian.
On that time period, why doesn't it, for the end time, why doesn't it say the 13th day at 00? Why does it say 24?
Just the reporting that's completing the day there.
Okay.
It could report 13 at 00 as well.
Because that's freaking me out for some reason.
Yeah. So that's 24-hour period, Bear, basically all day. Okay. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay, don't worry, lots of practice, nothing to stress. Okay. So we're going to get into starting to look later in this week and first next week into some of the legal to go stuff. So, okay. Alternates for departure. Okay. I'm taking off. And if my weather conditions at my takeoff airport, my departure airport are below landing minimums, we must list an alternate airport. So why would I need to land at my departure airport? That's where I'm trying to leave. I'm trying to get out of there. Oop, I saw somebody pop up and change their mind. Lakeisha.
Maybe just in case something happens upon takeoff and then you can't re-land there. Visibility is not good.
Okay, so I am going to need to reference that visibility using the METAR. Why would I use the METAR instead of the TAF?
Because it's happening right now.
It's happening right now. I'm taking off right now. Okay, so things that can happen. I can lose an engine. I can have a mechanical issue. The flight attendant said, oh my gosh, somebody just passed out and they're having a heart attack. Like there could be a lot of different reasons that I need to abort mission and I need to return to field, we will call it, return to field. So what we're doing there is we need an alternate for that if I can't turn around. Now, takeoff minimums are much lower and it's much easier to get out than it is to land. It can be really gross all day. I'll give you an example. We had a plane today that was stuck in Eugene. Again, the whole area up there was absolutely disgusting and socked in with a really thick fog. Eugene was really bad and they never actually got up to landing minimums. However, we had a small window that we were able to get the plane out based on, we had the visual reference he needed in order to take off. But he needed a takeoff alternate because there was no way he was coming back to land if anything happened. So we're going to reference the METAR because it's what's happening right now. We're going to reference visibility and we're going to find an alternate airport that is going to, if we have 2 engines, which is what we have in this, it's going to be less than 1 hour at normal cruise speed in still air with 1 engine inoperative. And that's another good thing to be able to roll off your tongue. So how far can the takeoff alternate be? It can be within 1 hour at normal cruise speed in still air with 1 engine inop. If you have 3 or more engines, it can be within 2 hours at normal cruise speed in still air with 1 engine inoperative. So now with these, we get to have, we need to have that plan. We need to be in that, hour space, but we do have, we have enough gas to have a little bit of wiggle room and figure something out because of the fact that we have the gas to get all the way to our destination already. So we're not typically adding gas to this flight. We are just giving them option with the weather and the NOTAMs and the information, and a plan is what we're giving them. So that's when we need a departure or a takeoff alternate. You will hear that said either way. Again, good things to remember because you will be asked these a lot. So do I need a departure alternate out of Seattle? Okay, so our METAR. Okay, so this is done as Seattle, SeaTac Airport. So KSEA is that airport. It's on the 11th day, 2253 Zulu. Okay, the winds are coming from 340 at 10 knots. Okay, it's 1/2 statute mile is your visibility. Your first layer of clouds are broken. Oh man, backwards. It's not letting me go back. Okay, broken at 400. Remember, I'm adding 2 zeros. My next layer of clouds is overcast, OVC, at 600. And then for tonight, we're going to not worry about this. This is temperature, dew point, altimeter, the type of equipment they have, additional information there, right? Okay, so what is my visibility? Caitlin.
1/2 statute mile.
Okay, and what's my ceiling? Caitlin.
I think you'd go with the overcast at 600.
We're actually going to go with the broken. It's at 400. It's the lowest layer of broken or overcast.
Okay.
Lowest layer of clouds, broken or overcast. And they're always going to be listed from the lowest to the next to the next to the next. So if this had said few at 400, I'd skip it, scattered at 600 and then maybe add something higher. But my ceiling is 400 feet. Okay, so I've got 400 and a half. Now, if I come down here, oh, come on, it doesn't let me zoom. Okay, down here, what's my ceiling requirement to land? Somebody new. Riley.
200.
200 feet. And what's my visibility requirement to land? Nichelle.
1/2 statute mile.
1/2 statute mile. Now I want to double check all my little NOTAMs, see if anything is out. Is the glide slope working? Is the all the lights working? Everything good? I checked it. Everything's good. So do I need a takeoff alternate? Any votes?
No,
Okay,
I don't believe
thumbs
so.
down. No, I've got a couple of no's, bunch of thumbs down. Okay, no. Good job. We do not. I can turn around and come back. Now, do I need to do discretionary departure alternates? Honestly, I rarely, if ever, do. The only reason the reason is, again, because I have a lot of gas to play with. I can figure out something on the fly. The only reason that I would need one if I have a strong belief, like I'm right on the edge and everything is showing me that it's going to get worse over the next little bit and I just want to prevent a delay and I know the captain's going to call and ask for it anyway. But otherwise, if we're at 400 and we're right at the minimums like that, I'm going to personally not stress it. So I can always add it on a fly. It's not that big of a deal. Might have one in my back pocket if I need, but that's for me because, again, I don't want to watch the weather for it. Because once you list an alternate departure or destination or whatever it is, you have to maintain legal alternate minimums for the duration of the flight. So it's just more things to keep track of. So with that being said, like I say, it's I don't look at the discretionary ones on this one nearly as much as I do on the destination. Because again, once I get to my destination, I don't have enough fuel to have, figure it out on the fly oftentimes. So if something changes dramatically, I might have to have them divert early in order to preserve fuel to be safe. So with this, I've got the entire fuel to get to my destination. Now, here's another question that'll come up. Lakeisha.
I'm sorry, but I did have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that only visibility was needed for takeoff.
Visibility is what determines it. You're going to need it to land. I'm going to be honest, for me personally, I always choose the, I do both because it's such a quick timing thing.
So, okay, so, but if visibility only is needed for takeoff, but that's not in relation to alternates, like you need both to determine if you need a takeoff alternate?
Okay, you need to use the METAR and reference visibility. You need the visibility.
Only.
Yeah.
Okay.
Me personally, in my thing, if I don't have both of them, I'm adding one. That's the one time I guess I would add one, is to make sure that we have that. It's just like I say, I don't add them for, well, let's say it's 3/4 and it's, I've got a 600-foot ceiling and it could get worse. Whatever, I'll figure that out on the fly if I have to do something. But Brian.
And so that applies to both the departure airport and also for your destination airport in terms of legal to go. You only care about, you're only legally
visibility in order to apply that alternate.
Okay, gotcha.
But different rules based on departure and destination. So let's compartmentalize departure alternates right now. But yes, we're looking at the visibility is not to determine if you need an alternate. It's legal to go for your destination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so this becomes a question. I am flying from Salt Lake to St. George. It's a little bit itty bitty flight. It's under an hour flying in still air with one engine inoperative. And it's one of the 5 days a year that our weather's gross here and we need an alternate here in St. George. Could I use, nope, we're looking at the wrong one. Sorry, I'm going the wrong direction for you. I'm trying to jump ahead to the destination. So I'm going to change this around. So we're going from St. George to Salt Lake. Salt Lake is what's really gross. So scratch all my old thoughts there. Salt Lake is really disgusting weather. St. George, sorry. I'm having a hard time tonight. I'm tired. So St. George, I'm headed up to Salt Lake. St. George is really bad. That 5 days a week or year that we have bad weather and you need a takeoff alternate because I couldn't turn around. I don't have the minimums. Like I say, it does happen here on occasion. My destination is Salt Lake. Could Salt Lake still be my takeoff alternate? And my destination all wrapped into one. Lakeisha.
I would guess depending on the reason why you need the alternate, if it's
well, I need a takeoff alternate because St. George is gross right now. Let's pretend it is. The ceilings, when it fogs in here, it doesn't happen often, but it's bad.
My thing is has the engine fallen out? Do we need to re-land right now? Or is the passenger just unconscious? Can we make it to Salt Lake?
Well, so here comes, it's based on what I'm going to list as my alternate. Okay. We're not saying that this has happened yet, that there's a situation they need to come down, but if I can't land at St. George and I'm taking off out of St. George, I'm going to fly to Salt Lake and I am required legally to have a departure alternate because I can't turn around and land.
So yes.
Can I list my destination as my alternate as well? Joseph.
Yeah, I would say yes, partially too, because it's only I think a 40-minute flight to Salt Lake from St. George.
That's like total block time. Yeah, it's even a little shorter. So
yeah.
Yes, you actually can. you can list that. And remember, you're going to jump into your plan. I can't very commonly just put a plane on the ground. Just, I can't land it on the highway ideally, unless there's a reason it's flying out of the sky. We're trying to get to the closest space we can, but honestly, that's as close as getting into the airspace and getting to Vegas. So it's one of those things that it has a lot of benefits to that. Now, if Salt Lake was also gross weather, then I couldn't use it. So, but it is a possibility. And that question does come up is, can I use that? Or if I need a takeoff and a destination app, airport, am I going from Los Angeles to St. George and I need one of each? It's both weather, bad weather both times. Can I list Las Vegas for both of them halfway in the middle? Sure, why not? So you can do those. It becomes on, is that alternate legal? Which is another discussion we're going to have. So that's where we are on, do I need a departure alternate? So let's go back one. And remember, okay, if I ask you, when is a takeoff or departure alternate required? You are going to kick off and tell me when the weather conditions at the takeoff airport are below landing minimums. We must list that alternate, takeoff alternate. So I can't turn around and land. And how far away can that be? The answer is going to be less than 1 hour at normal cruise speed and still air with one engine inoperative. Kind of cool. Most of the airlines will have like a specific, number of nautical miles that you can fly to go into that space. Questions? Anybody needing to chew on that a little more? We just took a whole bunch of sound bites that you're going to become professionals in and tried to smash them down your throat really quick just for funsies. Because we do that. Okay. So we looked at Seattle. Everybody agreed we did not need one because we had the half statute mile. We're right at minimums on the visibility, above minimums on ceiling. So good to go there. Okay. Alternate airports for the destination. Okay, now, just so you know, this is destination versus takeoff alternate gets mumbled jumbled in people's minds. So try your best if you need to write them on different pieces of paper, if you need to put a circle around one, a square around one, however it kind of straightens it out in your brain. Usually people know what they're talking about. It's just they start mixing up all the rules and things like that. So with that takeoff alternate, it's very simple that I can't turn around and land. I do not have the weather minimums to land at this airport. Pretty simple, nothing extra. Now, if you have a destination that needs an alternate, so this is where I'm flying to. So I'm going back from St. George to Salt Lake. I'm heading to Salt Lake. The answer is, do I need an alternate? Okay, it's going to be the 1, 2, 3 rule, we call it. So an hour before or an hour after the estimated time of arrival, the ceiling needs to be at least 2,000 feet, and the visibility needs to be at least 3 statute miles. So if my weather is not reporting at least 2,000-foot ceilings and 3 statute miles of visibility within an hour of either side looking at that forecast, so I'm going to organize myself there. I'm going to need an alternate. Okay, that's my 1, 2, 3 rule. Okay, so when you're doing flight plans or when you're doing legal to go practicing and things like that, to get your brain kind of turned on, just kind of pro tip here, here's my ETA. So write it down up front because your brain will kind of catch up, So if my ETA is 12:30Z, that means I need to look in any part of the forecast that would be 11:30Z to 13:30Z. Does everybody see that? So there's going to be that 2-hour window. We making sense? Brian.
Is that because I'm assuming a tap won't have like hourly conditions, or does it? As far as
Not
forecast.
necessarily by the hour, but it gives time ranges, which we'll get into that first thing tomorrow night. We'll kind of take this. I want to do this. We'll kind of review it one more time tomorrow night, and then we're going to like look at some taps. So like the one for Reno, it was like a 24-hour single line. I mean, do I see single line taps? Yeah, happens all the time, especially like in the spring when everything's nice and we're going into summer, things like that. Going to be 10 clear and beautiful all day. We don't expect to change. Some taps can be long and messy and crazy, and they can have conditional language, and they can have different bits and pieces along the way that they could be from this hour to this hour, and it will tell you. Sometimes you fit in one line of the tap. Sometimes you need to look at 3 lines of the tap because it's such a dynamic and changing day for the forecast that it's got multiple lines. So you just have to double check those and kind of make sure, but like writing that down at first really kind of will help you kind of keep that shrunk down. Like I said, I remember just like figuring out some of those legal to go things, even on a desk for that first few months. Like I literally would keep, again, a note page sitting down my thing, and I'd have all my little ETAs written out, and I'd kind of have myself little notes because I'd kind of have to really stop and focus and really read everything, you know. And now like my eye just scans through stuff much quickly, and then it jumps back and forth. Like I think sometimes unless I need something, my brain doesn't even fully process it. So don't be overwhelmed by that part of it. But we will look at a couple of taps and kind of practice this tomorrow as to what needing an alternate for your destination. Big memory, 1, 2, 3 rule, because you will be asked, when do you need a destination alternate? The 1, 2, 3 rule. Hour before, hour after, you can say plus minus 1 hour from your ETA. You'll need to have at least a 2,000-foot ceiling and a visibility of 3 statute miles. Okay, that's the destination. And again, people will, like I say, practice so that you get the difference between the takeoff alternate and the destination alternate, and make sure to compartmentalize those. It'll make it a lot easier when you start having an oral exam. Questions, comments, concerns? Because we're going to practice is what we're going to start with tomorrow. We're going to kind of review this, and there's some tasks for us. Okay. We're going to have a little bit of fun. Again, TAF 101, and we'll go from there. Okay, any questions? I can go ahead and come back. Stop sharing the screen. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and stop recording. So does anybody have any burning questions before I do? Or I can stop it and we can ask any burning questions. I know some people are not comfortable asking them on camera, which is totally cool. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop that. So like I say, going on tomorrow night, we're just going to keep moving through this. There it goes. Not wanting to